commissioner. Dave, do you know where Josh is, or should we get started because this is kind of a full agenda?
I think we just proceed, and there'll be plenty of time for him to join us.
Okay, we'll get started with a land acknowledgement that Missoula County acknowledges that this event takes place on the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. We'll continue with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thanks, Violet. I pledge allegiance to the flag United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, Violet. Any public announcements? Okay, any public comment on items not on the agenda? There are current claims list as of December 28th, 2021 to January 4th, 2022 is $1,188,284.39. Looks like we have 5 public hearings. We'll begin with the Kerry Baldridge and the Missoula Rural Fire District Annexation Petition.
Cool, thank you. Hi, my name is Kerry Baldridge, Deputy Clerk and Recorder. The Clerk and Recorder's Office has received a petition to annex land into the Missoula Rural Fire District. The property to be annexed is Parcel B of Certificate of Survey 2497, located in Section 11, Township 13 North, Range 21 West of Missoula County, Montana, located at 3852 Galbavie Drive, Missoula, Montana 59804. The petition was signed by the property owners who represent over 40% of the acreage and 40% of the taxable value of the property to be annexed. The annexation has been approved by the Board of Trustees for the Missoula Rural Fire District, and a notice of hearing was published twice in the Missoulian. So the petition is now ready for your decision. Sorry, do you want me to repeat any of that, Josh?
No, I got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Is there any comment on this? Okay.
All right.
Josh, Dave, do you have any comments on this?
No, I do not. It sounds like a reasonable request, and the fire district's okay with it, so I would move that we approve the petitions.
I'll second that.
Any further comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Cool. Thank you. Have a good rest of the meeting.
You too. Next up, we have Tim Lurley with Wellington Acres Minor Subdivision.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is indeed the Wellington Acres Subdivision, minor subdivision proposal by James and Catherine Palmer, represented by DJNA. The 4.69 acre property is located in Orchard Homes on 7th Street West, about 3/4 of a mile west of Reserve Street. It's also in the neighborhood of the DNRC property and FWP Region 2 headquarters, Big Sky Park, Hawthorne School. This is the subdivision layout, 3 equally shaped or equally sized parcels roughly at about 1.54 acres each. There's a topographic break along the this is actually to the right of the slide is south, to the left of the slide is north. This is 7th Street here. This is a distinct topographic break that runs through lots 2 and lots 3. The proposal is for a 20-foot road to be constructed to provide access to lots 2 and 3 in the rear. Lot 1 would continue to access off of 7th Street where there is an existing residence. These two parcels are currently vacant. The zoning in this location is ZD9, which is a citizen-initiated zoning district, which allows up to 2 homes per acre. This proposal amounts to about 1 home per 1.56 acres. The growth policy that's applicable, the amendment that's applicable for this area is the Missoula area land use element, which recommends residential uses between 3 and 11 dwelling units per acre for density. Just to give you somewhat of a perspective of where that 3 to 11 dwelling unit per acre recommendation, what it applies to, it's this portion of Orchard Homes that typically has a little bit better access to municipal water and sewer, although in this case, Mountain or Missoula Water runs in front of the parcel. The nearest municipal sewer is actually right here. So what's being proposed for this project is a municipal water connection and individual septic systems. Traditionally, hay and alfalfa have been grown on the property, and there's an irrigation ditch that runs along the northern property boundary along 7th Street, and also a facility that runs along the eastern property boundary. Those are highlighted on this slide here. This is the ditch that runs along 7th, and this is an easement that's proposed for the facility along the eastern property boundary. Both of these easements meet the standards in our subdivision regulations. As I mentioned before, a 20-foot wide road is proposed to serve the 2 lots in the back, Lot 2 and Lot 3. Lot 1 will continue to access directly from 7th Street. We have a recommended condition that this road is named independently of 7th Street for emergency 911 location purposes. There is one variance to a requirement for through connectivity to the property to the south. Again, south is to the right of the slide. Staff supports this variance due to the optimal home site here on this upper terrace of Lot 3. And also because in Target Range and Orchard Homes, there are probably better opportunities for through connection that don't involve adjacent agricultural lands, which there's definitely some decent contiguous agricultural land to the south. And there's also this topographic issue here that the developer will need to contend with, but it's probably not the best place for a public road to connect through. There is a recommendation based on water quality district recommendations for slab on grade construction for the homes on the property. And that's because there's a test well that indicates fairly shallow groundwater during the high water seasons of the year. This would be applicable below the 3155 foot contour, which runs right here. So a house built on the upper terrace on Lot 3 would not have to have slab on grade construction, but our recommendation is that any new homes basically below this line here be built slab on grade. Again, this does have a connection to Missoula Water, which takes care of the water supply for firefighting issue, as there's a fire hydrant about 110 feet from the northeastern property line, and there will be individual septic systems on the property. We received one comment from the neighbor directly to the east. He irrigates his small farm from the ditch near the common property boundary. And he asked the question about whether it was prudent to construct the road near the ditch, especially in the area where there's that grade jump up to the upper terrace, because there may be a ditch impact. My conclusion was that the ditch easement that's being proposed with the plat is the best insurance that the facility will remain functional. It's basically a commitment that the facility will remain functional. I should also note that the Missoula Irrigation District will be called on to review the final road plans for that 20-foot wide road that accesses the 2 lots in the back. So again, just for reference, the ditch that we're talking about is this, probably hard to see on your screens, but there's a really thin line just a couple feet off the property boundary. That's the irrigation facility along the eastern property boundary. And the road is intended to be built away from that facility, although it will be relatively close. There was also a question from Kent as to whether utilities will be buried or not, as above ground utilities could impact the agricultural operation to the east. The plat does show buried utilities extended to lots 2 and 3. So let me highlight those. There's a power pole right here, and underground power is proposed to be extended via this line right here all the way up to the boundary of lot 3. All right, we have a couple motions, commissioners, as you choose to move forward, and one is regarding the variance that's being requested. In summary, staff recommends approval of Wellington Acres.
Do we have opportunity to comment?
Yep.
So my name is Brooke Martin. I am the co-owner of the agricultural operation that is to the east of the proposed subdivision. I did not receive legal notification of the subdivision as co-owner of that property. However, the other co-owner of that property is my husband, Kent Sugden, and he is not able to join the meeting today because I did not receive notification, and because he's unable to join the meeting. We have significant concerns about not the subdivision nor the size of the subdivision, but the location of the road and whether it's realistic to put the road through that grade. We can't even get a half-ton pickup up that grade to pick up hay. The idea that a loaded fire truck is going to be able to go up and down that grade is something that we know is not practical. The only option to have the road in that location is described in the documentation that I received yesterday, and it involves a significant and substantial impact on the irrigation district that we rely very heavily on to maintain our agricultural operation. And for these reasons, we would like to request postponement of approval until we've had time to fully examine the information that's been provided and to consider the impacts on not only our agricultural operation, but also on our historic access to our property, which is immediately adjacent to the property line. The access was there. To have significant construction going through is likely to impact our ability to access our own property. And we have 2 historic buildings also on that property line that are likely to be significantly impacted. And lastly, and most of deepest concern to us, especially after last year and the drought, is that we are likely to see an interruption in our ability to irrigate our own agricultural operation. And so we would respectfully request more time to consider the impact to our existing property from not the subdivision itself, but from the placement of the road.
Thank you. And
yes, hi. So my name is Bob Rinfrey. I am a project manager and land surveyor with DJ&A. We are here representing the client. I appreciate, Brooke, your and Kent's comments. I welcome them. I am joined here with Mike Russell, who is a professional engineer for DJ&A, and Grant Myrie, who is a engineering tech. They have completed most of the heavy lifting on this project, and I would hope that we can use this time to describe what we're trying to do here, and hopefully eliminate any animosity or questions or anything like that regarding the proposal. So with that said, Mike, would you mind addressing Brooke's concerns?
You bet. Again, for the record, my name is Mike Russell. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Montana. And Brooke, thank you so much for your comments and your concerns. You're right that the existing topography, if we were to keep the existing grades, it's not feasible to provide fire access or emergency vehicle access. The intent of the design is to regrade and spread out that vertical drop in such a way that it would meet county standards, especially for fire access. So there would be a little bit of cut and fill and spreading out that vertical drop so that we're within the thresholds of county standards. And I want to say that's 10% slope, running slope, although I don't quote me on that. We did provide a design that meets county standards. And your concern is very well heard when it comes to the irrigation facility directly adjacent to the road, which is along the eastern property line. And the commitment and contemplation of the design is to preserve that in place and in fact, potentially provide improvements to it if necessary. We have coordinated with the irrigation district and they understand the design and the intent of the design, and we are committed to ensuring that that irrigation facility remains in working order. And the design that's currently proposed should not have any deleterious effect to the facilities. So I hope I resolved your concerns, but I welcome any questions or any feedback. I unfortunately can't speak to the noticing process as I wasn't personally involved in that, but want to hear all of your concerns and we want to address all of them if possible.
So at this stage, and again, my husband is not able to join the meeting, so we are requesting a postponement of approval from the commissioners. And also, obviously, the landowners, Jim and Kathy, who we happen to like, have had the opportunity to retain professional advice, and we have not had that opportunity to obtain professional advice on the likely impact of this to our operation. Historically, our access is very close to the property line. It was there when we purchased the property in 2000. We haven't changed it at all. Two of the historic outbuildings are very close to the property line. They were there and have been there since probably the 1930s. The chance that a substantial regrading is going to impact the trees on the property line and that access to the water is something we don't feel like we've been given the opportunity to obtain counsel and advice for. And for these reasons, we're requesting a postponement of approval from the commissioners until we can consider and obtain our own counsel on whether this is likely, as we suspect it will and must be. We have lived there for 21 years. It is very hard to see how this is not going to impact us and not significantly going to impact us. It is a very long property border. Yeah, Dave.
If I may.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike. Can you hold on for a second? Dave's going to jump in here.
Yeah, maybe we could hear from staff. Ms. Martin, if unless I'm mistaken, it is not under. It is not within the ability of the commission to grant an extension if we are up against a deadline. That could only be granted by the property owner and developer if they so choose. So it would be good to hear from staff, both I think in terms of that point, but also in terms of the notice issue, Juanita.
So this is back to Tim then, or?
Yeah. As far as an extension potential, the actual 35-day deadline for this project was January 8th. And because of the logistics of everything piling up in January, DJ&A granted us an extension to the 13th, which is today. So any further extensions would be at their discretion.
How about the second question, Tim, in terms of notice?
We generate an adjacent property owner notice based on essentially GIS records. And so my understanding is that the notice went to Kent. For whatever reason, he's the one listed on the property. So I can't speak to the reason why he and he only was the one that was noticed for the property.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, Bob, did you have something?
I was just going to say on behalf of my client that we certainly prefer a vote at this time. However, I was going to extend the invitation to Brooke and Kent that if you wanted to come by, we would be happy to sit down to discuss with you how we would protect the irrigation line in place. We would welcome feedback. If we decide, or at some point, if the irrigation district decides that at this point we want to upgrade the line, we would of course want you and Kent involved in that decision. And I just wanted to say that you're invited to be part of the solution here, if interested.
Yeah, but the concern is, again, not with the size of the subdivision per se, but the road placement is very concerning to us. And again, it's very hard for me to, I mean, because Kent is not able to join, he's trying to join this meeting and can't. So with the link that was provided by the county, and so I don't want to speak for him. I can speak for myself. I know that we are both very, very concerned that this is a very large road that's being put essentially contiguous with and right next to our own property access. I mean, it is just historically, that's just where it was. And the fact that that amount of construction that must be done, that's not, while it's a very nice place to think about having a house, it's not accessible with that bench being where it is. And just the amount of land moving that has to be done, it's almost impossible to even suggest that this can be done without adversely impacting us, including financially having to, upgrade our own driveway to whether we would get disruption with our irrigation access, which this would be bad. It's like I said, you guys, the property owners have had a year to work on it, and we've had, well, I got the stuff yesterday, but we've had, we haven't had that much time, and it is extremely close to our property line and our existing access and historic outbuildings. And I just really would like the discussion to include that road not being right where it is, because it's a very impractical, it's something that's going to be expensive to fix for the property owners. And it's very hard to see moving that much earth right up against a 12-inch plastic pipe without having to basically cut off our water supply at some stage. It's a big amount of earth moving that's going to have to be done to make that bench accessible to a fully laden fire truck. And like I said, the subdivision itself is not the concern here. It's the location of a very large road right on our property border.
Thank you. Mike?
I just want to respond that the design of the road, and really it functions more of as a driveway. The size of the road is per the county standards, so I don't think it's a very large road. I think it's a very reasonably sized access road for these lots. I can also mention that the placement of the road was made by engineering judgment, and it functions quite well. It meets county standards. There is some earth moving required, that's true. It was designed in such a way so as to not negatively impact the irrigation facility. It meets the standard of care of professional engineering. It's a very feasible access, and we want to be neighborly and, you know, make and work with the irrigation district. But as the design currently stands, there should be no negative impacts to the irrigation facility. I don't quite understand the concern about the neighbor's access to the irrigation facility. If anything, in theory, if there was permission for the neighbor to use this road, this would do nothing but improve access, but I might not be understanding the concern.
Let's go to Dave and then we'll go to Brooke.
Thanks, Juanita. So a question, I think, either for Tim Worley or Mike, and this may partially address Ms. Martin's question. It's not optional for the developer to impact or not the irrigation facility. They cannot. I mean, as designed, the impacts must be avoided and mitigated. So it's not, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but we're not just rolling the dice in hopes that this will get built out as proposed. It must be, and it's on the developer and the project proponent to figure out, regardless of how costly it is, to build the road that meets Missoula County standards and build the road in such a way that it does zero impact to the irrigation facility. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
It looks like Kat was able to make it. Yeah. I'm sorry, Brooke,
they're asking you to comment on the meeting thus far. I've requested a postponement to give us time to examine the potential impact. There's an engineer here that's been hired by Jim and Kathy, as well as legal representation that have been hired by Jim and Kathy. And the engineer, he can speak for himself, has talked about significant grading to be done to provide access, fire truck access. And they've also described the 20-foot road as that they want to put next to us as a driveway. And you're on mute.
muted, yeah. Kent, you're still muted, sorry.
How's that?
There you go. Yep.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks very much for having us. Yeah, I echo my wife's comments. But the one thing that whole ditch along that edge has been leaking for 22 years, and it's leaked down exactly where they want to put the road through on that grade. You know, it's been essentially a seasonal wetlands on the bottom for quite some time. And, you know, I think we right at that that grade where the highest contour lines are is where they're going to put the road through. And it's right next to the irrigation ditch. And like I said, it's leaked for years, and it's fine. I mean, we can still get water, but it doesn't seem to be a very practical place to put it. And it's as written, it's a 2-lane road with 2-foot shoulders. It's a huge, it is a huge road that's impacting in a very close proximity to our property, and it seems like it would be reasonable to extend it down before you go up that grade. I see you don't have a plat map out, but
maybe Tim, would you be able to put that up? He's working on it, Kent.
Okay.
And this is Mike Russell again. I'll just chime in that the width of the road is per the county standards. We actually proposed a little more narrow road going up to the 3rd lot, and the county responded and requires a specific width for fire access. And so the width of the road is a function of the county requirement, not necessarily the desire of the developer.
Yeah, so that sort of seems like we understand that that's a county requirement to have a fire access road there, but what we don't understand is why putting it in the spot which was essentially intended for a driveway is still a good idea. I mean, the place that you put a driveway for access to a home and the place that you run a county road are not necessarily compatible. I mean, if this was intended to be a driveway, probably we'd be a lot less concerned, but the fact it's now required to be a county road is making us question whether it's in the right spot. If you have to change the type of access for county requirements, why not reconsider the placement of that access, because it may not be appropriate in this case.
Yeah, and my point was if you look on the top, that's going east. So our property is that whole boundary line that you see on the top. And if you can see where they're proposing the road, the far east, the top part of that road, it's really ascending those contours at one of the steepest parts to get onto the bench. And you can see how close it is to our property line, and the irrigation ditch is right on the property line. And like I said, it has been flooding for years, and that whole right where the contour lines first come up, right at between ours and Jim and Kathy's property, is where it's flooding. So that whole part down there, the whole first half of that road, is basically on a seasonal wetland. I mean, obviously you can grade that and make a road there. It seems like it might be better to put it somewhere else so that it not only is it not right on top of the irrigation ditch, but then it can ascend that up to the bench at a better spot along that. What's not shown here is the line of trees that are along that property boundary, or our outbuildings, which are also right on that property. So that is really our primary problems with this current subdivision. I mean, no one wants a subdivision, but our real current problem is just the road placement is just not, I think, workable under the current plans here. Thank you.
Thanks. It looks like Grant Myrie has a hand raised.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Grant Myrie, kind of design engineer, and been out to the site several times. We did take into consideration that pipe is leaking, and that's part of our grading plan. We create a low spot for that water to go. First of all, I also want to acknowledge your comments and appreciate your concerns, and thanks for showing up today to kind of help us see things. The other piece that hasn't been mentioned is this road is about 20 feet from the property line, so that gives a lot of room for security for that pipe. I did personally contact Missoula Irrigation District, and they are kind of on board to work with Jim and possibly do some upgrades. It looks to me like that pipe has been there, like you say, 30 years, and it is in need of an upgrade. And there is an existing kind of road prism in that location that Jim's been using for access, and it's kind of a practical spot for the road. The other design consideration we looked at too is if we put the road in the middle of the property or somewhere else, then we're affecting Jim's existing buildings and severely limiting. The developer really wants to put a house up on that bench, and if we put the road in a different spot, that limits the building footprint. So it's our experience that this road can be built for county standards, and there will be some earth to be moved, but we think it can be done in a way that's respectful to the neighbors. So
thank you. And Josh, looks like you were going to say something?
I just was going to ask about the repair to the irrigation ditch, which sounds like it may be imminent. One question I had, the approach onto the neighboring property, is that right adjacent to the property line as well? And Tim, are there rules or laws about distances between approaches on the same road?
Approaches are typically governed by, like in our case, it would be County Public Works as to where the appropriate access points are onto the county road. Okay. So in this case, that would be 7th Street. And there's practical considerations. There are times where you'll see 2 approaches right next to each other just because each landowner has a certain allotment of access points. So
does Public Works have to give a thumbs up or thumbs down, or is there a process around that?
Yeah, I think in all likelihood, there'll be an approach permit issued for that location. Public Works has reviewed this. We haven't received any negative comment as to this access point.
And so they're aware of the 2 approaches being next to each other, and they are okay with it?
Yeah, as far as I know.
I mean, the other piece of this that makes me feel a little bit less unsettled is what Dave was pointing at, that the developers cannot negatively impact the irrigation ditch belonging to the neighbors. They absolutely can't. And if they do, they are liable. They have to fix it.
Well, just kind of to speak to that, we're quite fond of our neighbours, but I feel a lot like we're being put in the situation where should it be impacted? I mean, they cannot, but cannot and will not are 2 different things. And should either our access to irrigation through these upgrades, impact our ability to continue our agricultural operation, or should this end up impacting our ability to access our own property, we're put in a fairly awkward position of having to litigate against our own neighbours. And like I said, we're really quite fond of them, and I'd rather through this process make sure that we aren't put in that position. That would be extremely uncomfortable for us.
Dave?
Yeah, I guess going back to staff again. So in a situation like this, Tim, what would happen if the developer here, the adjoining property owners, did damage in some way the irrigation facility? I would argue they will not, and if they did, there will be repercussions for that, and it would need to be dealt with. But could you walk us through how this would play out if some condition of subdivision approval does not play out as proposed, or if there's a violation of some sort?
Well, on the front end, Missoula Irrigation District will be part of the review of the road construction. So hopefully that would be the preventative piece. If there was some sort of damage to the facility to where the neighbor lost access to water, it's a little more of an obtuse argument, but I think you could say that the plat would be out of compliance with the spirit of the approval should the subdivision be approved, because the subdivider committed to maintaining that facility simply by putting that easement on the eastern edge of the property. So you have an adverse impact to an agricultural water user facility, and that's one of the state review criteria that we review for with every subdivision. It'd be a little bit, I've not seen that before in my time as a planner, but I think we would have discretion to pursue that as a violation.
Well, and I guess I would say to Kent and Brooke, if indeed it is the case that you have good relations with your neighbors, it sounds like they would probably be the sorts of folks who would not want to screw you over and damage your access to an irrigation facility. I would hope.
Well, I would hope so too. Yeah, the trouble is if we do lose access, we currently have 5 pregnant animals, sheep on the property. I mean, we won't. Oh, do we? I think one of them's not pregnant, but we're talking about animals on the ground here. It's like we're talking about shoulds and woulds and mitigation and responsibility if something goes wrong. And right now that those processes are all very slow, and lack of water is something that happens to have consequences quite quickly. And lack of access too, because our driveway is like, historically, we didn't put it there, historically right on that line as well.
Grant, and then I'm also reminded that we need to ask for additional public comment too, but go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, just kind of a practical standpoint, I just would remind that Jim's house is downgrade of this canal. So if there was some damage during construction, his house would be flooded. So he would be rather motivated to get things fixed and flowing back where they're supposed to.
Thank you. Is there any additional comment on this?
Okay, just a point of order that Tim or Grant or Mike had brought up is that Jim had been using that secondary access. That is actually incorrect. It's not been functional for over a decade.
Thank you. And Grant, your hand is still up. Did you have something to add?
No, I didn't put it down.
Okay, thanks. Is there, oops, Scott David.
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having us in. Tim, I have a couple questions for you as the developer or representative of the developer. I see the proposed sewer is going to be on the west side of the property development. Is that correct?
I should clarify, I'm Tim Worley. I'm planning staff for Missoula County, so you might want to refer to Bob Rinfrey.
Okay, perfect. I apologize.
Sorry there, Scott, I was muted. That is correct. I don't know if Tim wants to maybe share his screen again, but we are proposing that the septic and drainage fields are on the western portion of proposed lot 2 and 3.
Okay, perfect. So the water supply for the folks on the east side of Gladys, are they on well or city water?
I believe they are on city water. It is my understanding that their drain fields are on the east side of their property,
Okay.
of their house, yes. And
Okay.
hooked into municipal water facilities running down 7th.
Okay. All right. I guess maybe some clarification on that, because in target range, obviously we're very concerned and very protective of our water, and we want to make sure that we're keeping good water supply to our folks out there. One other question, I guess, has the sewer proposal, if this goes through, has the Target Range Water and Sewer Board been made aware of this development?
Tim?
Yeah, they were on the contact list when it went forward as a sufficient application.
Okay, perfect. Appreciate that. And then I guess my last question, in dealing with the ditch, I know there's other developments that are being proposed in the target range area, and I know that they've put stipulations on those developments that the ditch be updated to a concrete style ditch in order to preserve it and make sure that water is always available. If this goes through or is okayed, I feel that maybe it would be the responsibility of the developer to look at that. It's one way that we can preserve the water supply and we don't have any interference with water and or supply issues? Is that something that they would consider?
Hi, Scott. I would say, you know, we have been in contact with the irrigation district since this project started, and we will continue to do that. So yes, if they recommend an upgrade during time of construction, I think that that my client in this project would certainly be open to that.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Scott, do you have another one?
I was going to see if Tim would put the language back up.
Thanks, Tim.
Hello, I'd like to make a comment if you can hear me.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon.
For the record, yeah, we just need your name as well, please.
Oh yeah, okay, good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Scott Jones. I live over on Gladys Drive at 916 and here, I guess the southwestern corner, so to speak, with Jim's property. And just so you know, we've lived here 10 years and we're on a well, and I believe that that's the state of affairs on Gladys Drive, as people are on their own septics and well water and like it that way. And yeah, just been listening to the conversation and wanted to make that statement to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm reminded then that, yes, is there anyone else on the phone out there who'd like to make a comment? Any other public comments? Should we close it for commissioner discussion? Okay. Go ahead, Josh.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, given that last comment, which I'm glad to hear about, was going to ask Bob Rinfrey a question if we located the wells on the property east of the subject property to ensure they're the proper distance from the proposed drain fields, or is that a health department concern?
Hi, yes, that's a great question. So we have not located the wells. I must have, and I do apologize for everyone on the phone. I must have misspoke. I was under the impression that they're pulling water off of 7th Street only because it's so dense in there. And I do know that the septics are on the east side of the parcels that are contiguous with Jim's west line. So I would venture to guess that due to the isolation zones of the wells, that they would need to be potentially on the other side of the home, the west side of the home, along Gladys Drive, but I'm not certain.
Tim, can you show us where those drain fields are?
They're on the map here.
Am I not seeing that? Thank you. Okay.
And Tim, what's the,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
So what's the health department's going to have to approve those drain fields, approve those whole septic systems. And I imagine at that point, they're also going to be looking at nearby wells to make sure that distances are appropriate. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And Mike,
there
you
has
had
to be
your
an appropriate setback.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Tim, say that I interrupted you. Can you say that again?
There will have to be an appropriate setback between the new drain fields on lots 2 and 3 and the wells on those Gladys Drive lots.
Mike, did you have, Russell, did you have your hand up? I don't see it anymore.
Oh, I was just gonna, I'm looking to see if I can find in GIS the location of the well, but it's unlikely that it would be impacted in the required offset per DEQ standards, but if I can find it, I'll chime in.
Thanks.
So Juan, I'm okay. We can bring that language back up unless Dave has any questions.
No, I have no questions.
So I want to say I have a real deep empathy for the neighbors and their concerns about irrigation. And I feel like given the legal, professional, and personal relationships and obligations that are interwoven in this, that I believe that irrigation will not be hurt. And if it is hurt or damaged, it'll be dealt with in an immediate way. And my sense is no one wants that to happen, given we have neighborly relationships, also legal constraints. It's no fun to have this type of change happen right next to you. I wouldn't like it. Nobody would like it. And it's also private property. I'm okay moving that this goes forward, given that these conditions for mitigating harm exist. It's a rough thing, but I feel like it's going to work out. So I would move that the variance from Missoula County Subdivision Regs Section 3.3, 3.2, 3.4, 6.3 requiring a thorough connection be approved based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report and subject to the recommended conditions of approval in that staff report. That the Wellington Acre subdivision be approved based on the findings of fact and the conclusions of law in the staff report and subject to the recommended conditions of approval in the staff report.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Well, I think as had been requested earlier by or suggested by the developer's representative, that Brooke and Kent have and be afforded the opportunity to meet with the developer and developer's representative to further discuss the details of implementing this.
These are, I heartily applaud that as well, Dave. These are part of the professional and personal relationships that I'm referencing, and I appreciate the spirit that they brought to this, and the communication, collaboration will continue throughout the process, and that at the end of this, there may be a better irrigation system than the one that exists right now, and no damage done.
So Mike, Bob, and Grant, you'll sit down with Brooke and Kent?
Yeah, yes, that invitation is ongoing throughout the entire project aging period. Feel free to stop by anytime, and we'll do the same. We'll be on site, come over, and we can discuss it. The Palmers are not planning on moving, and they plan on continuing to live there even after development. So I think this is a good thing, and yeah, I suggest just open dialogue.
And in my somewhat simplistic thinking about the irrigation system, it sounds like the pipe needs to be repaired with or without this subdivision. So hopefully that will happen.
So it's been moved and seconded to be approved. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to, the one concern that we've had going into this is the placement of the road, and like if it was a driveway like originally intended, but the fact that it's required to be upgraded to a county road, and I just feel like we're not being heard with by the representatives of the developers with our request, which is quite thoughtful, that the placement of the road be reconsidered. And I feel like we could meet with the representatives of the developers, but that discussion, which I think is fairly important, is just completely off the table. And I just express frustration that I don't feel like that discussion is being, or that our we thought long about this, that we've not been heard, that is just, it's going to be there, and that's just not ever going to be an option to move that.
Dave? No, it's understood, but again, these are the standards that it has to be constructed at. We don't have wiggle room there.
Oh, that's no. I understood. I'm sorry. I don't want to be misunderstood. I understand that the scope of the road needs to be what it is. It just is impractical for it to be in that spot if it needs to be a county road. And I feel like that's the part that's not. I understand that the county has their requirements. I don't want to be misunderstood there. It's just that given that this now needs to be a different kind of access. The original plans for placement of the access seem to be impractical or at least extremely difficult.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to an application by Kerry Duff to utilize a family transfer exemption.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time. So I'm not sure where to start, but I have something that I'd like to read if that's all right.
We need us. I'm wondering if we should start with staff report on this.
We should start with staff.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry. I didn't realize this was Kerry Duff actually speaking. We just, hold on, we have to do a staff report first.
Okay.
Matt, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Yep. Go ahead, Matt.
All right. Thanks, Commissioners. Matt Heimel here with Community and Planning Services. So I'm going to provide a short overview of this family transfer request. If there are details that you want me to dig into or anything you want me to go back over, feel free to just speak up and let me know. So this is a request from Kerry Duff to use a family transfer exemption, which is a division made outside of subdivision review or exempt from subdivision review for a single gift or sale to a member of a landowner's immediate family. So I'll share my screen so we can see where this property is. So this property is about 5.5 miles southwest of Highway 200 as it crosses the Potomac community area. This is a pretty far out aerial image.
I'm not seeing anything here.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, Commissioners, we don't have great bandwidth right now in the office. My internet feels pretty slow, so things might take a while. So again, here's a broad aerial image of the area, showing it along West Ashby Creek Road. So on the next slide, I just changed to the next slide. This is showing the closer view of the property. Commissioners, can you see this closer aerial image? Okay.
Yes.
So the property is at 26192 West Ashby Creek Road. And there's also Ashby Creek is mapped as flowing through the property for about 0.4 of a mile. And the 46.23 acre tract is currently developed with one single family residence and a few accessory structures. And West Ashby Creek Road does cross the property along its boundaries, and there are a few driveways crossing the road as well. So the proposal is to divide this 46-acre tract into 5 total tracts. There would be 4 new tracts that are transferred to the landowner's adult children. So here is a slide showing the existing conditions. You can see the existing house and its accessory structures in the center of the property. And my next slide has the proposed conditions of the property. So 3 new 5-acre tracts on the southern portion of the property along West Ashby Creek Road, and then 1 new 5-acre tract on the northern tip of the property that's also near Ashby Creek Road that would be accessed via a secondary driveway. So for a little bit more context, the property is unzoned, so there's no zoning applicable here. And the 2002 Regional Land Use Guide describes this area as open and resource with a recommended residential density of 1 dwelling unit per 40 acres. So the proposed transfer would exceed the recommended residential density at a rate of about 1 dwelling per 9¼ acres. So in staff's review of rebuttable presumptions and general evasion criteria, we did find that there does appear to be the intent to evade subdivision review. And at this point, I'd like to bring Kerry back in, and we have some standard questions that I'll ask.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thanks, Kerry. Could you please state your name for the record?
My name is Kerry Duff.
Okay, so I have 5 questions. The first, did you buy the property with the intent of dividing it?
No, we did not purchase with the intent of dividing.
Thank you. 2, do you or your transferees intend to transfer the property within the next year?
That is not our intention, no.
3, have you talked to anyone at the county about going through subdivision review?
I have not.
Okay, and then 4, will the property be developed?
At this time, our children plan on putting homes and living there, yes. At least 3/4 of them.
Thank you. And then the 5th and last question is, will the recipients of the property be residing on the property?
Yes, they will be. At least 3/4 of them.
Okay, thank you. So commissioners, based on staff's analysis of the application and the Chapter 8 criteria, staff concluded that there does appear to be an attempt to evade subdivision review and is recommending denial of this family transfer. And like I said before, if there's any aspects you'd like me to go back over, please let me know, and I'd be happy to go over those.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so Matt, could you just say one more time what the density in the 2002 plan outlined and what the current density, if this was to go through, would be, and how those two differ?
So the recommended density per the 2002 land use guide is 1 dwelling unit per 40 acres. If we were to have 5 dwelling units on these 5 proposed lots, the overall density for this tract would be 1 unit per about 9.25 acres.
Thanks.
Dave?
Yeah, and Matt, could you just, besides the lack of substantial compliance with the growth policy here, what are some of the other red flags, as far as some of the primary red flags as far as evasion of subdivision?
Sure, commissioners. So under our rebuttable presumptions, there were 2 criteria that were hit. The first has to do with the owner owning other tracts of land and it not being clearly evident that there's the intent to reside. And first of all, there are 2 other tracts of land that are under ownership by the claimant. One is a 20-acre tract that's about 7/10 of a mile north of the subject property, and the other tract is directly adjacent to the south. So on my screen, on the lower portion of the screen, you can see Moose Tracks Trail. That's south adjacent, and that property is 95.9 acres in area, and that's also owned by the claimant. And then
May I speak on this?
Hold on, Matt has to, he's gonna finish. Hold on. But then we'll get back to you, Kerry. Go, continue, Matt.
So the second part to this 1 criterion is that the application states that the intention of this family transfer is for estate planning. So in that description about retaining ownership of various parts of property, it appears that the intention is for financial benefit without necessarily residing on the property. So that's one of the criteria points. And commissioners, if you like, I could proceed, or I know there might be another question as well.
Well, it sounded like Kerry wanted to respond to that first.
Yes, if that's all right.
Yep.
So the property to the south, which is acknowledged as Moose Tracks Trail, it is actually owned by Casey and Becky Anslow. They're purchasing it on a contract for deed from a gentleman named Bob and a gentleman named Tom. At the time they purchased it, my friends were short a little bit on their down payment, so I loaned them the money and they put my name on it. At the time that they paid it off, which was a few years ago, that little $7,000 stipend that they owed me, we didn't know that anything needed to be done, but at this point we have filed a quitclaim deed to remove my interest for that $7,000 off of there because it has been fulfilled. I do not own that property, and Casey would really take exemption if I started giving his property away.
Matt, did CAPS know that, or does that change anything because there's still the property to the north?
That's right. So there's still a property to the north. As for the property to the south, the ownership information is based on what the property information system showed at the time of staff's analysis. So it's possible that a deed was filed and not necessarily immediately shown on the data that I was looking at, or the state ownership data at that time. However, this criterion would still be applicable based on ownership of the property to the north and the application statements that I referenced.
And the property to the north is not contiguous, nor is there drivable access. It is behind a state locked gate.
I'm sorry, Matt, were you showing us that, or?
Commissioners, I can bring up that property. Fortunately, as I speak, I'm having trouble connecting to the property information system, so it might take a minute.
Yeah, I mean it's
okay. It's less than a mile just to the north.
Okay. Were there other another question I have for Matt, I guess, were there other rebuttable presumptions that were triggered besides the two that you just mentioned?
Yes, and I'll quickly just describe what those touch on. So one of the other rebuttable presumptions was about not being clear intent of occupancy or use, because the application relies heavily on indicating estate planning, which indicates financial benefit without necessarily residing on the parcel. And then moving on to general evasion criteria, we did see that the claimant is in the business of selling land, being possibly a licensed broker with Kerry, Duff Properties Incorporated. And also, just moving through my evasion criteria in the staff analysis, we did reference a possible boundary line relocation as being able to accomplish part of the layout, and that relocation would be with the property to the south. However, given that there might be other information to show that the claimant no longer owns it, that might no longer be applicable. However, it does not change staff's recommendation. Another general evasion criteria that I mentioned is non-compliance with the growth policy. And the last evasion criteria I'll touch on is whether this exemption would cause significant impacts under subdivision review for an equivalent proposal. And this is not to mean that we look at it pursuant to all the same standards as a subdivision, because by nature of an exemption, they are not reviewed according to those exact standards, but we can see that there would be some aspects that bring up challenges for subdivision that would lead someone to choose the exemption as a way to evade subdivision review. And some of those potential factors for this property that could lead to the imposition of significant conditions of approval or possibly denial of a subdivision would be, and this is not a all-encompassing list, but potentially off-site road standards, on-site road standards, wildfire hazard mitigation standards, because this area is in the wildland urban intermix with a very high hazard rating, and repair and resource management plan requirements, given that there is Ashby Creek running through it. So that's the broad look at the evasion criteria. And if you like, I could go over any of those again also.
And I would love to address a lot of those as well.
Okay, go ahead, Kerry.
So I'm from Potomac, Montana. I was born in Missoula and I grew up in Potomac. 3 of my 4 children have attended Potomac or Sealy Lake schools. This is indeed our home. 2 out of 3 of my children plan on moving home to build and start their lives. One's in college in Fargo. The other one's in the oil field trying to get valuable lessons learned so he can come home and work in Missoula. Our youngest child, she's at the U of M. She still and currently lives on the land in question. So we're not trying to avoid subdivision, whatever you're stating. As a family, we're trying to be good stewards of the land. We have utilized programs for this land, such as the Blackfoot Challenge for healthy thinning of trees to help the land and water resources return to a healthy state. We are also part of the Potomac Fire District, which we were just added over the summer. That is a new thing because we do recognize that it needs to be taken care of up there. But we also take pride in our community. We do community service. We help whenever we can, like donating needed items to the fire department to be part of that, giving back to our Potomac community. We also support local 4-H. We coordinate with sharing of dumpsters with bear-proof containers, with neighbors. We're trying to deal with mail theft right now in the area. We have multi-generational people, including my husband's mom, living with us, trying to do our own organic farming and growing of vegetables and fruits and living kind of off the land with our family. We have no intention of subdividing as what you're saying, but we're trying to give our children a place to call their own and call home. And it is estate planning. In August of 2021, my husband had a car fall on him and we nearly lost him. And this is what's sparking this. We have done our wills, we have done our medical powers of attorney. This is one thing that my children need to be able to know what's theirs. We don't want to spark any fighting once we're gone. I'm a mother of 4 children and a wife, and I'm trying to do what's best for everybody involved. And the last thing we would want is the kids fighting. And moreover, I'm a straight shooter and I make plans, and my kids would expect nothing less than that from me. So we're trying to get our collective affairs in order and not leave the guesswork behind. But one of the criteria that I saw in the packet that came back was stating that, and as the gentleman just hit on, that I'm being discriminated against because of my profession. And I would just like to point out, I've never divided land. I've never requested a land division. I'm not a developer. I have no idea what the subdivision things are that I'm being accused of evading. I just am trying to do what's best for my family, and so they all have their piece to come home to.
Thank you, Kerry.
Go
ahead, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for that description, Kerry. One response to the point about working in the real estate industry. The question is not intended to suggest that you or anyone else who is wanting to utilize a family transfer that happens to be a realtor is somehow immediately guilty of something. It is to recognize, though, that it's a factor to take into account, because there have been instances in the past where, by virtue of someone's profession, this is simply being used as a ploy to split up a chunk of property that will then be flipped and turned around and sold. So that in and of itself is by no means going to be a determining factor in any of this. It's just meant to be taken as one thing to look at into the broader context. Question, I guess I do have a question for you, Kerry. As far as the estate planning, When you reference that in your application, were you thinking of estate planning simply in terms of providing properties to your or parcels to your adult children, or did you mean something else by estate planning that we're missing here?
Just in light of my husband's accident, we realized we had a lot of unfinished business, and if we wanted the kids to each have the property and maintain our homestead for future generations, that we didn't have that spelled out.
Sure. And how soon will it be that any of your adult children actually reside on these lots that are proposed to be created?
I have one that is currently in Potomac waiting. I have one that won't be done with college for 2 years. And at that time, he plans on coming back. And the other one is on a 3 to 5 year plan.
Okay. One final question, and this is for Matt. What is the size of, I guess, the smallest of some of the adjoining parcels surrounding the subject property here? Because it appears as though none of these adjoining parcels are probably 40 acres in size, at least some of the ones that you depicted there.
That is accurate. Some of this, the one that's to the south of us is more than 40.
Okay. And
the remainder are 15 or less, or 20, 15, 20, very close.
Which is, I guess the point of my question is I'm not enthusiastic about deviating too much farther from the parcel size indicated in our land use or growth policy, but also just by way of comparison, what are we looking at, Matt, in terms of those immediately adjacent parcels, the sizes of them?
So,
it's not able, oh, okay. You're able to put the, yeah.
So there's an aerial image that shows some comparable parcels, and unfortunately the Orion database is not giving me exact acreage right now, but I would expect smaller average, such as what you see to the lower left hand of the subject property, would be approximately 20 acres. I'm estimating there. The intended tracts are 4 new 5-acre tracts. So we would be seeing 5-acre tracts, which are smaller in area than what we see in the immediate adjacent vicinity.
Matt, what's the address here? Because I'm struggling like seeing like the big picture. So what can we look it up if property information isn't working for you?
Property information is working. It's just I just don't have the Orion ownership data flowing in from the state.
Hey, Juanita.
Yes.
Maybe this is a question for John Hart, but certainly also for Matt. As far as what would be picked up during a subdivision review versus during a simple family transfer, I mean, it's always a concern of mine in family transfers that mitigations or considerations that we would otherwise review during a subdivision proposal just kind of slip through the cracks. Is there, John Hart, is there any way to condition, I think I probably know the answer here, but is there any way to condition the approval of a family transfer on some level of review that otherwise might not be required for a family transfer? Can you condition it at all? Or is it just a straight up or down approval?
Dave, it's straight up or down approval, at least in terms of the Subdivision and Platting Act. Perhaps we could adopt subdivision regulations that allow for some sort of conditions on an application, but we don't have those subdivision regulations at this time. And I don't want to be on record saying that we necessarily could. But that would be the second way to condition an application like this, but we don't have that option.
So there's no way, based on some of the potential significant impacts that Matt listed, be it riparian impacts or potential road impacts or requirements that might be triggered during a subdivision review process. There's really no way to take that into account with an approval of a family transfer, other than just approving it and hoping for the best.
That's correct. You know, I mean, of course, we could ask the applicant to voluntarily do that, and the applicant could agree to it, but we don't have a way. There isn't a mechanism under state law to require that. But Matt, correct me if I'm wrong.
It all sounds correct to me, commissioners.
Thanks.
Is there additional public comment here? Oh, we have.
Yeah, I would like to address some of that, if I can.
Yep, go ahead.
As far as like some of those, the parcels, we have to go through a lot of the county stuff anyway, such as septic and things like that. We already need to work through some of that for the kids to each put in their own home sites and approvals.
We need to, that's it. If I could follow up with Matt on that. So Matt, what of some of the potential significant impacts that you mentioned that we would otherwise review during the subdivision review process might still get picked up on during by engineering during the permitting process and such?
Yes.
So during the building permitting process, commissioners, we would only pick up sanitation, so being well, septic, and compliance with building codes. In my analysis of this, I did not see that this area is a county maintained road. I think the county maintained portion ends east of this property, so it would not be reviewed for, say, approach permitting access, to my knowledge. There would be no gradient and drainage review, and there would be no TAPS land use review based on those factors that I listed earlier.
So the pieces of this that are precarious for me are around riparian buffers, roads, and the potential for a wildfire.
And the roads are already currently in place. It would be driveways off of the main road that is maintained or managed by the BLM. Riparian, as far as like the creek, I don't think any of it directly impacts the creek because it's on the other side of the ridge. And I'm sorry, I missed your other concern. I'm sorry.
Just around one wildfire, yeah.
And we are part of the Potomac Fire District, and we were asked and added this last summer. Recently, the whole area wasn't before then. We are now.
And what does that mean, Kerry?
It means that they now service our area, which before we were considered out of their area, but now we've been put in and put notice where we have to pay taxes or dues. I'm not sure how they look at it, but per house, per structure out there, so they can get out there and take care of our things in the event we needed it. But in addition, we did thin for wildfire prevention to help mitigate and reduce fuels.
So I think what we've discovered is that wherever your home site is going to be located, what's most important is that you mitigate the fuels within 100 feet of that structure. That's truly what's going to make or break whether your home survives. In this case, Matt, and you, I apologize if you mentioned this already. This is an unzoned area, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So while we are updating our zoning regulations and we'll have wildland urban interface standards there. I don't know, without zoning in place here, that probably would not kick in, I suspect. So it's going to be somewhat on the property owners, and it's kind of a hard way to look at it. But if folks don't take care of their property and mitigate the home ignition zone, you're rolling the dice whether if there's a fire, your property will be damaged or not. But all of that to say, even though this is an area subject to wildfire, which pretty much could describe anywhere in Missoula County, there's a piece of it that it's kind of buyer beware, and I don't know to what extent regulatory mechanisms are going to fix it right here.
And we do have a relationship with the Blackfoot Challenge and have done that for our current and existing home, and we have no problem meeting their recommendations for that, for wildland building.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment? Okay, we're going to close the public comment.
I'm wondering
Yep.
if Matt could bring up the map again and pull out a little bit so we can see a larger area. I'm still hung up slightly on the parcel size thing because, again, I totally get it as far as the 1 per 40, but we've got kind of a cluster of smaller parcels in this area. What about to the north there? Can you do anything intermediate?
Yeah, I'll try to have a happy medium there. It's either very far or very close.
To the north, I border state land.
Okay.
You do.
So all of that to the north is state?
Correct.
Big tracts.
Okay, so there's no possibility that's going to get broken up into smaller parcels.
So when it's just further south and west that there's much smaller parcels towards I-90. Is that?
It's the Clinton and Potomac side. I kind of sit halfway between, and the mining claims are different sizes, but general tracts are between 1 and 5 acres up the Wallace Creek side until you hit the density of about 11 acre parcels in a lot of those parcels to the south of me, the southwest. And then the Potomac Valley, a lot of them are 1, 2, 3, and 5 acre tracts to the Potomac side of it. And then 10 and 20s as you get closer towards me.
Matt, in terms of just gaming out, if this was to go through the subdivision review process and everything that's being proposed right now could be theoretically run through that process, without a doubt, that's a more costly process. But when it comes to riparian resources, what would be reviewed in that case, and what would need to happen here just offhand to try to minimize impacts? I mean, what would we be typically looking at that we are not looking at today?
Primarily, we would look at buffers and no build zone areas on either side of the riparian area, in addition to a maintenance and restoration plan. So if there's going to be new road or new driveways built near it, there would need to be a riparian resources management plan to address how that will be handled in a way that does not compromise the integrity of that riparian area.
None of that would get picked up during the building permit process, so you could carve away at the riparian area and without any recourse, or
Commissioners, I do not know if this specifically would be applicable to this location without having confirmation from the conservation district, But in general, within Missoula County, there is 310 permitting that is applicable for work near stream areas. I just don't know if that necessarily applies to this western section of Ashby Creek. So that's the only other thing I can think of for it, but that would not be a component of our building permit review.
So you're saying there's no review for Ashby Creek? I mean, what would look at Ashby Creek? What?
During
none of the, oh, sorry.
Review, excuse me, during building permit review, we would not look at impacts to Ashby Creek.
In any reviews that we would be doing, would we be looking at impacts to Ashby Creek? Or, oh, sorry, John Hart, you shut up.
Well, I was just going to confirm that the Missoula Conservation District would and does take jurisdiction over Ashby Creek and you know, the perennial tributaries, and they would not allow disturbance to the bed and banks of a riparian area in this area, you know, probably 10 to 20 feet beyond the high water mark. So there would be some consideration of and some review of, you know, setback and riparian protections under the Missoula Conservation District purview and jurisdiction.
At this point, the proposed, how we have it set up, it's not even on the same ridge of the mountain as Ashby Creek.
I guess it was the property then on the north that was.
Yeah, or any of the could we, Matt? Could you bring back up the proposed family transfer?
Yeah.
I'd love to see where those parcels are. And yeah, where's Ashby?
No, so the north. I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, my computer dropped off. The property on the north would access off of a driveway that's already over there servicing another parcel to the northwest of me. And none of the three southern pieces would even touch the creek. And it's a fair distance away.
Like how
50 to 100 yards maybe.
Thanks, Matt.
So I have a pointer on the PowerPoint. I hope you can
yes,
see this. So Ashby Creek runs about where my pointer is rocking back and forth, south of this access way. So there's for those of you who cannot see my pointer, there's a note in the middle of the screen that says existing structure. Here in the middle of the screen, just north of the word existing, running from left to right, is the approximate location of Ashby Creek.
So there are no riparian resources in the new lots that would be created.
Not for the new lots being created, however, in this criteria where we look at potential subdivision review, in subdivision review, each lot will be considered a new lot, not necessarily a remainder that doesn't have a review.
Right, although the largest new lot that would be created is the lot where there's already existing structures. So it's a
kind of moot.
Does seem a bit moot.
Sorry, Josh, did you?
No, I was just talking out of turn. But Dave answered, got my questions answered. Thank you.
I guess I'll just say a couple things. I feel a little bit better, at least as far as the riparian impact, knowing that there really are no riparian resources in the newly created, well, I guess you could consider all of these newly created parcels, but the newly created parcels that would be occupied by the applicant's children. There could be other impacts that would go unaccounted for here. I'm not exactly sure what all they would be at this point. Some of my concerns about the level of density of development are somewhat mitigated just by virtue of the fact that we have large tract parcels to the north that are state owned, and that this is not the only parcel in the area that's been split up over time. It's a separate matter of whether it was a good idea, whether those previous smaller parcels should have been created in the first place, but they are. That's kind of the context that we're dealing with. I'm less concerned about the rebuttable presumptions about estate planning when you actually get down to what estate planning means in this case, which probably is the same thing that could apply to any family transfer, where the whole reason folks are giving it to their children is to plan for the future. I'd love to hear what Josh, you and Juanita think.
So my sense of this is, I think, Matt, I think you're totally right on looking at this through the filter of law as you are supposed to, and those rebuttable presumptions are real. I think given the subjective breadth that we are given, we can look at things like the size of parcels that are in close proximity, and that there are only a few, and that there's big chunks of state land, that the riparian areas aren't going to be impacted, and that would be considered if it was going through subdivision. But given that the way this is laid out, they're not going to be impacted, I feel like that breadth of subjectivity kind of allows us to allow this to go forward, even though these rebuttable presumptions are in place. I want to honor your work. I think you did right, and that we have some breadth, a decision space to work in, and within that, I'm okay seeing this through. That's my 2 cents, for what it's worth.
And looking at just the amount of development and the size of those parcels just to the southwest of this, I agree, Dave. I'm more comfortable. And
well,
especially, yep, keep going.
Yeah, I think I'm in alignment with both of you, and it also helps. And going back to the applicant's clarification of that other parcel to the south, one of the reasons why that's a rebuttable presumption is, and forgive us for getting hung up on some of this technical jargon here, but basically why that's a red flag that we look at times is because if a property owner has other parcels that could simply be gifted to a child, we oftentimes ask, why are you not doing that instead of creating a bunch of lots that, and this comes from a hard-learned experience where we have been at times hoodwinked, where someone actually did go through this process and then quickly turn over those additional lots when other options may have remained for gifting another parcel of land to a child. So it's important to know that the ownership history, and that you actually are no longer the owner of that parcel to the south. So I'd be ready to make a motion here, which may differ from the motion that you had prepared, Matt. Is there motion language, or I can
have to change the negative?
I can modify it on the fly.
Yeah, I think you can.
Okay.
Have it on the screen. There might be a lag. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, this is what I was looking for. I would move that the request by Kerry Duff to utilize the family transfer exemption as presented in the subdivision exemption affidavit be approved.
I'll second that.
Thank you so much.
Discussion? Any further discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Last little thing I want to add is just thanks, Matt, for being so thorough and for really setting us up to have a robust discussion. You did your work well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you, Kerry.
Thanks for your insight.
And thanks, Matt, for being so quick and nimble.
A lot of wordsmithing there.
Okay, man, this is running long, so we have to tighten things up here. Apologies. Looks like request board approve and adopt resolution of intent to adopt the housing action plan. Jordan Lyons.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having us. I'm Jordan Lyons, housing specialist with Community and Planning Services. And thanks for all the CAB staff who can be here. And thank you so much, especially for our wonderful consultants, Lorelei Gentinen and Oscar Saucedo Andrade, who are going to be helping me out today. So we're talking about our Missoula County Housing Action Plan, Breaking Ground. And just to give a little overview, we'll be talking about our process in developing this plan. The folks at Echo Northwest, Oscar and Lorelei, will talk about some background information, the framework for action, and the goals and actions in the plan. And then they'll pass it back to me to talk about the proposal for adoption of the Housing Action Plan as a growth policy issue plan. This plan is the product of lots of input from Missoula County community members. It started with an early stage of the process was asking housing questions on our community needs assessment that was completed by almost 900 people. We recruited a steering committee of various diverse housing related stakeholders. We had lots and lots of one-on-one meetings and group meetings with stakeholders from all over Missoula County. We presented at public meetings, including community councils. We created a page on our website about housing. We had an online questionnaire to make it easier for people in the public to submit comment. And throughout the process, we kept people up to date with email blasts, as well as, having press coverage and things like that. And then in December, we had a public hearing at the planning board, and that brings us to today's hearing. And for the next slide, we're going to talk about a little background on the problem, and I will pass it over to the folks from Echo Northwest.
Thank you, Jordan. I will be covering briefly the context and background of what is Missoula County's housing problem, but overall, there are 4 overarching factors that have contributed to Missoula County's housing affordability challenges. I will touch on each of them here briefly, but generally we've identified them to be 1, housing supply issue, 2, housing costs have risen, 3, incomes have not kept pace with housing costs, and 4, households are spending more on housing. So based on our analysis, Missoula County has a shortage of about 24 housing units. These are units that Missoula has underbuilt when compared to national trends.
Wait, Oscar, can you say that? 2,400.
Yes, 2,400 housing units.
It sounded like you just said 24, sorry.
Oh, sorry, 2,400 housing units have been underbuilt in Missoula County. And this is based on national trends that we've seen, and also based on recent COVID-19 trends where Missoula County has seen additional households move in to the area. We believe that this number has increased a lot more since 2019. And so this provides, this has a lot of implications to Missoula County's housing market, specifically when there's a growing demand for housing coupled with limited new construction and rising development costs. This causes housing costs to increase. And so when we look at housing prices in Missoula County, we've seen that housing has more than doubled since 2010, and housing is just increasingly becoming unaffordable to the typical Missoula County resident. Can you go to the next slide, please, Jordan? And so when we compare housing cost to median family incomes, we've seen that there's a big disconnect
between these two. Median family incomes, unadjusted for inflation, have only grown 15% in the last decade, while for-sale housing prices have grown 109% in the same time period. So this creates a lot of implications when residents are trying to rent or trying to buy their first home. And so this creates increasing affordability challenges. And we've seen that renters are the most impacted here because they are paying more out of pocket for housing compared to owners. And when we look at cost burdening, which is those households who pay more than 30% of their income, we see that renters, about 50% of renters are cost burden compared to 24% of owners in 2019. Next slide. And then I'll turn it over to Lorelei to speak about the framework for action for our housing action plan.
Hello, everybody. Lorelei Jensen with Echo Northwest. Thanks for having me. Good to see you all again. You've seen this graphic before, but we felt like it was important context to raise again to the top of your minds. To acknowledge that for a housing market to function well, it needs to have abundance at all price points. Otherwise, you end up in a situation where you've got bidding wars, and inevitably the people with the most money and the most resources are the ones who will win those bidding wars. And when you're experiencing a shortage, as Missoula County is, the goal should be to build as many units as you can in the market environment, as well as in the supported environment that require public investment to be able to build. Even the most well-functioning market environment is not going to provide sufficient units for the people at the bottom end of the income spectrum. This framework very much influenced our thinking about the actions, and we have been thinking about programs and policies that help to connect people to existing affordable units, as well as strategies that add units to the market, particularly those that will serve low-income residents. Next slide. We have a wide range of types of actions that are included in this plan, all the way from just simply making sure that people understand what resources are available to them to help to connect them to housing and to go through permitting processes, et cetera, all the way on up to actions that are more aggressive and require more money and help to move the needle more through things like actually funding development or acquiring and disposing of land. Next slide. We've got 3 goals in the plan. The first is to use the county's unique toolkit to increase housing production in the places where it makes sense to do so. The second is to build programs and funding that can help residents move into housing more affordably. And then the third is to work together with other agencies and entities in the housing ecosystem to really build the complete implementation capacity. I'm not going to read through all of these. Oh, go ahead. Thank you, Jordan. I'm not going to read through all of the details of the actions. You all have them in your packet, and you've seen them before in the past as well. And we'll hopefully have some time for Q&A for you to be able to hit on any questions that you might have. Maybe just a couple quick highlights on each of them. As I said, introducing the goal, the county has a unique toolkit, and we've been very thoughtful about how to go about using that to increase housing production through doing things like investing in infrastructure, looking at the land that you already control as a county entity or could add to dispose of for affordable housing. Those are the kinds of things that are included in this particular goal. Next one. When thinking about supporting programs and funding to connect people to housing, a couple to highlight here, we think it's, we have heard from many stakeholders, including some of you all, that helping people move into homeownership, into the wealth building opportunities that provides is really critical. So we've got an action to think through how that could work and to develop a program. That's one action that's here. We've also heard a lot about the potential for things like right of first refusal or deed restriction to make sure that we are keeping housing that is already affordable over time. And we can dig into the details on any of those that you want in the Q&A. The third and final goal is to build implementation capacity. Some of this is just helping to understand who's out there. So the concept of a master flow chart of all organizations, who's doing what, so that when there are issues, you know who to call. And other examples include working with other jurisdictions outside of Missoula to think about making changes to state and federal housing policy that are currently acting as barriers to you all being able to be as effective as you'd like to be. So that's just a real quick overview of all of those, and we can hit any questions you might have later.
All right, thank you, Lorelei and Oscar. And so just to give a little more info about our process here on the proposal. So I told you a little bit about our public process. And now I'll tell you a little bit more about our findings and conclusions, what the action the planning board took, and then we'll take a look at a recommended motion. So our CAP staff recommends and finds that the Housing Action Plan conforms to and carries out multiple Missoula County growth policy goals, and the staff report goes into those in quite a bit of detail, but there are a number of goals in the growth policy about housing affordability and economic development, access to services, and this housing action plan will help advance each of those goals. Also, it also conforms with other important documents like the land use element in the growth policy. It conforms with many of the key imperatives and the aspects of implementation from that document. And finally, it does conform with many of the existing area plans that amend the growth policy, including the Lolo Regional Plan, the Sealy Lake Regional Plan, and the Swiptacan Master Plan, which PowerPoint was very insistent needed a larger bullet. So I'm sorry if that's confusing. And so based on those findings of fact, staff conclude that the Housing Action Plan, Breaking Ground, was developed through a robust public process. It is consistent with the Missoula County Growth Policy goals, objectives, and strategies. It furthers goals related to housing, access to community services, infrastructure, development review services, and coordination. And it is focused in more detail on actions needed to address housing needs and challenges facing Missoula County. So it really meets that definition of the issue plan of focusing more closely on the issue of housing. And we had our public hearing before the planning board on December 7th about this housing action plan. And we provided a review of public comment, which also was in the board packet. When we did our questionnaire, we allowed the public to submit written comments, but we also got some quantitative data. We listed all those actions just like Lorelei went through, and asked the public to rate them as very important, somewhat important, not sure, or not important. And we had over 70 responses, and all of those recommendations had more than 50% say that they were very important or somewhat important. So we took that as a sign that in general there was pretty good consensus that these were actions we should be focusing on. And we also received many written comments that talked about a lot of different themes, and some of them included focusing on smaller, lower cost units, regulating vacation rentals, and down payment assistance. And so those would be some themes from the comments that, as Lorelei likes to say, there's a home for those in the plan. The plan does address those, we think. And we also had some written comments that we felt like were a little bit outside of the scope of the plan we weren't able to address. And those included lowering taxes, discouraging in-migration, and imposing rent control. So, you know, we are sensitive that property taxes impact housing costs, but that's just complex, involves the state. You know, there are many jurisdictions that have property taxes, including the city, school districts, special districts. In migration, you know, there is not too much we can do about that, or, you know, lends itself to a philosophical discussion of what we would want to do, but beyond the scope of this plan. And then rent control, that's the type of action that the state just has not empowered local governments to do anything about. They reserve some rights regarding housing and landlord-tenant law and things like that. So with all of that information in hand, the planning board unanimously recommended adoption as a growth policy issue plan. So that was great to get their vote of confidence on that. Since that hearing on the 7th, we have received one more additional comment, and it just advocated for regulating short-term rentals and looking at their impact on neighborhoods. And again, so that action 2.7 in the plan does say study short-term rental and second home impacts on the county's housing market, which I think is kind of the first step to. Sorry?
I think that was an accident.
Oh, okay, no problem. So I think that's kind of the first step to, you know, finding the right balance and some kind of regulations that'll find the right balance on that issue. So with all that in mind, we come today with the recommended motion that the Missoula Board of County Commissioners adopt the resolution of intent to adopt the Missoula County Housing Action Plan, Breaking Ground, as an issue plan of the Missoula County Growth Policy as recommended by the Missoula Consolidated Planning Board and based on the findings and conclusions of the staff report. So with that in mind, and I'm sorry, since I've been sharing my screen, it's hard for me to see. Do folks have questions or discussion?
No, we can see it. Yeah, is there, I don't see anyone, their hand up, but is there, yeah, any public comment on this, or anyone on the telephone calling in? Comment on our housing action plan. Okay. Closing public comment. Josh and Dave.
Yeah, love to. That's possible.
Yeah, go ahead. I can't see you guys either for some reason.
You can't? Oh, geez, sorry. So it's a question for Lorelei and Oscar. Could you describe how in Missoula County we are different than other places, these sort of high quality of life, fast growth places in the Intermountain West, and how are we different? How are we the same and how are we different as Bend and Bozeman and Bellingham, other places that don't begin with B?
That's funny. I never thought about the B connection there. There are a lot of you all. How are you different? I think you're all experiencing very, very similar housing pressures right now. And I'm sure there are differences, maybe small differences in magnitude and in the sort of the location that is being drawn to within the city or county. But I'm not sure that there are big differences. Boise's housing market is completely through the roof right now and has had a similar trajectory to what you all are experiencing similarly in Bend.
And Boulder and Bellingham, maybe it's just the M. That's our only real difference.
I know, I think you might need to change your, yeah, that's right. You've got the M, so.
Well, hey,
I'm glad to hear that, but because just want to make sure that there aren't things we have been doing specifically to us that we've done wrong that otherwise would have prevented what has happened, that we are in a similar boat to all these other high quality of life places.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would draw a distinction between the Vales and Aspens and Ketchum, Idahos of the world that are much more resort driven. You know, the pressures and the kinds of development patterns that they're seeing there are different, but all of the B places that you named you all are in the same boat together.
Thank you.
Dave?
Yeah, just to follow on that. So yeah, admittedly, if we are experiencing some of the same growth challenges, affordability challenges as some of these other places, given the array of recommendations in this plan, have you seen any of these other communities experiencing the same challenges we are, employ tactics that are in this plan, and have you seen them make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of these communities are now in the process of grappling with the problem that you are also grappling with. And so they are in maybe slightly ahead of you by a couple of years in terms of trying to implement more aggressive approaches to addressing housing affordability, but are not far enough along at this point that we'd be able to like draw direct comparisons. It's a very similar toolkit. The one slide that I showed that had the sort of less impactful to more impactful is a pretty good definition of the range of things that can be done in any community, and most of them are working through that. The one thing I will say is that the places that are best poised to make the most progress are the ones that are being aggressive on funding, because without public money to help to support the production of affordable housing, it's very difficult to significantly move the needle. So like, for example, the city of Bend, actually this did happen quite some years ago, has implemented a construction excise tax and is using that to fund affordable housing production in the city. There are other communities that have thought about doing bond measures, those kinds of things, and there's a home for that in the plan to start to think about what kinds of revenue sources would really be most helpful for Missoula County.
So Lorelei, those other entities you just mentioned, those other tools, it sounds like the public money was being put towards the production of housing. Are there instances where public money is put more towards the consumer end as opposed to the producer end in terms of housing?
Yeah, 100%. Toward production of housing and or toward rent supports or home ownership programs. Those tend to be more through partnership with other entities, you know, housing authorities or land trusts. But yes, that is also part of the toolkit.
Do we have full flexibility to do deed restrictions in Montana? I mean, so we can't do rent control, but what's the space around deed restrictions?
My sense is it's voluntary. You can do whatever. I don't think we have any ability to thou shall.
Thou shall. Okay.
Voluntarily, a person could do whatever.
And is there a way for us to incentivize a person to volunteer?
Through money, for example.
Yeah, right.
And I guess my question is, and we have the freedom to do that, it's just voluntarily. Okay.
So, Lorelei, I just had this concern that we have national demand to live in Missoula, which is a local place. Right? Is it possible to meet national demand with local supply?
I think we've talked about this at past meetings too, and my answer is going to be the same, that it is a really big challenge. And I would say that your ongoing partnerships with the city are going to be really critical, because the county, you know, only controls so much of the pie here, which is why that third goal around improving coordination and collaboration is so critical, because you are not the only actor here. It is going to be very, very hard for you to, in the near term, build your way out of this problem especially with market rate production only. And because so much of the demand is coming in at the top end of the income spectrum, it really does put a lot of pressure and onus on the county and your partners in the city and in other nonprofits to be focusing on the affordable end of the spectrum. because the market is not going to be meeting those needs. And if you want Missoula to continue to be a place that has the full range of income diversity, it's going to require that kind of investment, because without that, the price pressure is going to just continue to push things up and push people who can't afford it out. And that, of course, creates a lot of challenges for economic development and for, you know, all of the other kinds of questions. So this is why the emphasis on thinking about funding and thinking about construction of units that are affordable, either through deed restrictions, other kinds of mechanisms, is so critical for your strategy.
So hearing you say that makes me think that leaving this to the market alone is not going to solve it. We're going to have to create some type of intervention, because left alone, the market would push where the returns are highest, which would mean eliminating that diversity you talked about and really focusing on the higher end where the money is. And if we want to maintain our character as well as make sure people have places to live, we're going to have to intervene in some way.
That is the best executive summary lead into this plan that could have been written. So we should have just given you the task.
Hey, I appreciate it.
It's not too late to amend the text. So.
I think it says that. Maybe just not.
I was trying to make sure I could get your approval. Now I'm going to repeat those words again later.
Okay, very good. Blame me if you get in trouble.
Well, I guess I'm delighted to see this come forward. We've talked about a plan such as this for literally years, and imperfect as it may be, because this is a work in progress and the living document. We're going to try some things, and it may not work out exactly as we thought, and we will adjust accordingly. But this is, as with our event earlier in the day when we were looking at our acute and chronic challenge with homelessness and houselessness in Missoula, and taking some bold actions to try to address it. This is kind of in the same vein. We're going to do something here, and it may be risky at times, but it cannot be left to the forces of the market alone to resolve itself. So I'm glad we're where we're at, and I certainly thank everyone who played a role, including our community partners, in bringing this to where we are today.
Yep, this will not be shelf art. We've already begun some of these action steps, so this is great.
Yeah, thanks a ton for all your work.
Yeah, and thank you for your leadership.
Well, is there a motion?
Oh, I'm happy to move that the Missoula Board of County Commissioners adopt the resolution of intent to adopt the Missoula County Housing Action Plan Breaking Ground as an issue plan of the Missoula County Growth Policy as recommended by the Missoula Consolidated Planning Board and based on the findings and conclusions of the staff report.
I will second that.
Any further comment? All in favor? Aye. Wow, Jordan, Lorelei, Oscar, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take
Bye.
care. Okay. Next, we have resolution discussion over the Canyon Gate Ole's plan variation. And we'll have staff, just a reminder, folks, we're doing staff reports, more a reminder to myself. Then the applicant and developer will comment, and then there'll be public comment, then we'll close public comment, and then commissioners will discuss, and hopefully we'll be out of here before too long.
9 o'clock.
Yeah, so we'll just try to be as succinct as possible with our comments, and then public comments, try to keep them to less than 3 minutes, and please don't repeat comments that have already been said. Okay, so Matt, is this you?
Yes, this is me. Good afternoon again, commissioners. Matt Heimel here with Community Planning Services. I just wanted to give an update. Well, first of all, this is a continued hearing on the request to revoke the Canyon Gate / Ole's plan variation. This was opened up for public hearing with the County Commission on December 9th. The agenda item was and still is a consideration of a resolution to revoke that plan variation. And public hearing was left continued until this date. thanks to a extension with mutual agreement with IMEG. So just to summarize where we are, I will share my screen. And so my screen is here showing East Missoula, and the property I have highlighted, in addition to property just the southwest of it where my cursor is, has a what you can think of as a zoning overlay, which is the Canyon Gate Always planned variation. And just a brief summary, this was adopted in 2011 to provide for attached housing units with modified space and bulk requirements. It had a very specific development plan. And so the request before us is to revoke that plan variation. If it is revoked, then the underlying CR3 residential zoning would be applicable with all of its allowed uses, space and bulk requirements, and other provisions of the county zoning regulations. The planning board considered this request on November 16th and voted 6-1 to recommend approval, and staff also recommended approval of this request. Since December 9th, we have received some public comments, and I just want to provide some clarification on one of those comments. Well, I have a couple points to bring up. So I know of 5 written comments we've received since then, and one of the comments that's it's all in a folder for this meeting also, but one of the comments raised concerns recently about firefighting capabilities in the area and firefighting equipment. And I did reach out to Justin Schaefer with East Missoula Fire, and did learn that East Missoula Rural Fire District has an automatic aid agreement with Missoula Rural Fire District on all structure fire calls. They receive a ladder truck on every structure fire in East Missoula. So East Missoula sends 2 engines. Rural Fire District will send the ladder truck and an additional structure engine. So Justin did not indicate that he has any issues or concerns over firefighting capabilities. There was also another comment from East Missoula Community Council, and I'm bringing this up because there was this comment and many other comments also indicated a desire for commercial use at this location. And I would like to point out that if the plan variation is revoked, CR3 zoning will apply, and there are some limited commercial opportunities available as uses that are allowed by CR3 zoning, but not with the really specific design standards that were called for in that comment letter. We did also receive some elevations and some additional plan drawings from IMEG, and although we're not looking at a specific use, and the question for the commissioners is not about a specific use or development plan approval, this is helpful to demonstrate the intent of the applicant for future plans at this property. So I can bring that up, or with that, commissioners, I see that IMEG staff is on the call right now, and they could also have that up and provide information if needed. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so IMEG, I don't know who wants to go first.
Hey, just for the record, my name is Joe Dennert. I'm with IMEG, and I'm here with Paul Forsting. And yeah, Matt, we can bring those up to provide context as people have questions. I'm probably not going to bring them up on the screen now, but I do just want to address a couple points. First and foremost, I really just want to thank the public. There's been so many comments really from the start of this process. And that's phenomenal to see. And that's something that, we prioritized from the beginning. We sort of went above and beyond with our public involvement. Another developer could have just gone straight to building permit or decided, hey, we're just going to, put up these 44 units. But, we really appreciate the involvement from the public. And although we weren't able to, incorporate everything that they wanted and make all their opinions reality because of, working with a developer, it doesn't detract from how grateful we are that we've received the involvement that we have. And obviously, Matt, thanks in the planning board and the original commissioners hearing for, your thorough presentation and for kind of bearing the weight of getting us all on the same page. And obviously the commissioners for, being here. You have a tough job, and it's been a long meeting, so I'll try to keep this short. But I think it's really worth getting at the core, at the beginning of all this and talking about really why this plan variation was created. You know, what did the developer have in mind? Why did they put this plan variation on the site? And at the time, you know, the developer was concerned about market conditions, and so that plan variation, essentially what it did is it, you know, had a lot of variations from the base CR3 zoning district, which still exists, but it was an intent to be able to create fourplex buildings and then sell them to keep the project profitable. So their idea was we'll build something, we'll sell it, and then we can build the next one as we see fit if it's necessary. And so, you know, clearly that's not the case now, but it was created for that reason, and it was self-imposed. It wasn't under any, you know, unique conditions or special conditions on the site. It was just a way to have different modifications to the CR3 base zoning district. So, you know, why we want it revoked, and I'm really glad that, you know, the folks presented before us, because the entire character, the spirit of this project is to create affordable units. You know, they want to put forth these 59 units to make them affordable. And the only difference really between the 44 unit plan that exists in the, you know, plan variation now and the 59 unit plan is an 8 foot of building height, right? So that 8 foot of building height brings it up to a 36 overall building height. I know that the CR3 base zoning district has, you know, that 125 feet, which has kind of made people freak out. But for multifamily dwellings, the max is 35 feet. And we have those elevations and we can show them to provide context. But that's not an atypical building height. You know, what we're proposing here, there's examples of 3-story townhouses that are near single family residences. You know, there are CR3 zoning districts in this area that would allow 36 foot building height for multifamily dwellings, and even higher if they weren't doing multifamily dwellings. We're talking about 125 feet. So it's not really atypical. And it's worth mentioning that, you know, the plan variation that exists now has restrictions on side setbacks or variations on side setbacks. It has variations on lot widths. It has variations on lot size, but it's still applicable to the height restrictions. So if the plan variation isn't revoked, you know, the developer has all right to say, okay, well, we need to make money on this. We're going to build these 44 units and we're going to build them to 36 feet, you know, building height. And that's a concern that the, you know, public comment has raised, and that's full within the right of the developer. So from our perspective, why not make it more affordable for people who actually want to live in the area and get 59 total units, you know, for an 8 foot building height difference. So, you know, all that is a great justification for revoking the plan variation. But, you know, also it's as simple as the base zoning district is CR3 here. There are other areas in East Missoula that have that base zoning district, and the developer wants the ability to exercise the right within the CR3 zoning district to enjoy the benefits that other people in the area that are zoned under CR3 have. Now, probably the biggest theme that ran through a lot of the public comments was, why not commercial? You know, how do we get commercial here? How do we make this viable with commercial? First and foremost, like I said, the spirit of all this is to create affordable units. I mean, the developer still wants to make money, but they want to make affordable units. And an easy way to adhere to the regulations that are required by ADA is to put handicap accessible units on the first floor. That you don't need an elevator, there's roll-in showers, all the amenities that come with these handicap accessible units are done on the first floor. So putting in a first floor commercial, you know, space further complicates that. Then you're talking elevators, you're talking about, you know, having to raise people up off that first floor. And there's an example on, what is that, Russell and Mount, the apartment complexes on Russell and Mount. They have first floor commercial and they've had it for 6 years. And now the developer, and this is in Missoula, you know, this is in a highly developed area with a lot of potential for office spaces. The developer's converting that to residential space because no one's wanted to rent it. You know, and so now they're, you know, trying to make profit and they're converting this first floor commercial. And when we're talking about tipping the needle in the direction that these public comments are going, I mean, small office space, small retail, I don't really think that's going to tip the needle. And at the end of the day, we have to be realistic on what's available at this site. You know, this isn't a huge site. We're limited to the acres that they own. And so putting in a Trader Joe's or, you know, a market or restaurants or retail, it's just not feasible. Parking alone is not feasible there, not to mention the other requirements. So, you know, in weighing these on a scale, I feel like every single time, and it's justified by the presentation before us, the affordable housing units is going to outweigh the need for small office retail space, or small office or retail space. So that's kind of our interpretation of why not commercial. Another big theme brought up in the public comments was, why not wait? Why not wait till we get this new zoning? Why not wait till we have something coming down the pipe that could potentially give us what we want? Well, first and foremost, this site is past, present, and future in alignment with what's going on in Missoula. It aligns with the comprehensive plan and the growth policy, right? It aligns with the existing zoning, the CR3, and it aligns with the proposed zoning as it stands now. Now that could change. The proposed zoning could get thrown out the window and they could say only commercial. But the reality is we're in past, present, and future alignment. And I mean, we started this process in May, and we've been waiting to break ground on this and get affordable units now. I mean, that's the end of the story as far as I'm concerned on why not wait. Well, why would you wait? We clearly have a need. And although it's not all going to come from from market rate houses and come from developers, like she mentioned, it's certainly a step in the right direction. So anyway, all that being said, at the end of the day, in my opinion, why approve this? Well, there's a lot of justifications, but I think one thing that should be considered is, this is infill development, right? There's sewer out here, there's water out here, there's public transportation out here. This area has been designated as an area that the city of Missoula is interested in annexing. And so, getting residents in an area is the best justification that we're going to get a grocery store. It's the best justification that we're going to get for infrastructure upgrades. It's the best justification that we're going to get these things that the public is desiring. And I know it's going to sting if something comes in that you're not super happy about, but I don't know. I see this as the best path forward. So clearly I'm not opinionated, but all that being said, I have 3D elevations we can show to provide context. And Paul and I are definitely here to field questions. And Paul, if I missed anything, jump in here. Feel free.
No, Paul Forsting, IMEG. No, Joe, you did a great job. Thanks so much. Yeah, we're available for comments and.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So I'm assuming that we don't have any more staff or applicant or developer comments, we can move to public comment. Is there public comment? And let's keep it tight. So if you have any public comment, if you could use a raise hand function. Okay, it looks like Lee Bridges.
Hi, thank you very much for having this as a public hearing. I'm Lee Bridges with the East Missoula Community Council. I've lived here for almost 40 years out here in East Missoula, and we're a very cohesive community and want to remain that way. We here in East Missoula have actively spent years working with CAPS on our growth plan and zoning in our community out here. We are now nearing the end of all of our hard work by finalizing that zoning. Our growth plan out here was our vision of creating a cohesive family community, including reopening our elementary school, which serves as a binder for long-term commitments of families to remain in our community. The current zoning in place for this property that we're specifically talking about limits the apartment units to 44, which is far more preferable than 59 units of single bedroom and efficiency apartments stuffed 3 stories high that lends itself to being more of a transient community which completely contradicts the long hard work we've been already doing on our growth policy. This being said, we're requesting that you please do not approve the new zoning variance that they're asking for, and we will have to settle for the 44 units going in, which in our opinion is the lesser of 2 evils in this situation. It's a load on our infrastructure. It's not helping us achieve the goals we set forward in our growth plan in having a cohesive community of long-term residents committed to our community. It's more of a transient situation, in our opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Joe?
Can I just clarify something just for the public record?
Go ahead.
First off, Lee, thank you so much for your comment, but I want to make sure that the language of zoning variance or proposing the zoning variance isn't misconstrued, right? We're asking for a plan variation revocation. We're not asking for a variance for the CR3 zoning. I just wanted to make sure that that was stated. Thank you.
Well, okay, I'll just comment that what we are aware of and what you were asked at the last hearing was what would go in if it remained the same, which was the 44 units, and what would go in if it was changed. And it was the 59 units. We just, yesterday, you sent us the elevation drawings that I did forward to the commissioner, so I'm sure they've seen them. Wow. If we have the choice of the 44 and the 59, it's obvious what our choice would have to be to make. That's as close as we can come. Based on those two options, that's as close as we can come to where our zoning is going. And so I differ with you in a lot of the statements that you made in your presentation earlier today.
Thanks, Lee. Next up, I believe we have, oh, disappeared, Ildy White.
Hi, yes, I am in support of a lot of what Lee said, and again, given the option, I know the language is confusing, but we'd settle for the 44 rather than the 59. Again, I feel like that's kind of a central location in our community, and we'd rather have it be more of a neighborhood center as it is designated in the future zoning, and not be crammed full of apartments with people that are largely probably commuting to Missoula proper to work and don't have any investment in the current community here. I do believe we have a strong community sense, and that many of us here would like to continue developing that rather than just make it a bedroom community of affordable apartments and housing units.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other comments? Don't see any in our raise hands. If there are any on the phone, it's *6 and begin speaking. Not seeing anything on the phone. Okay, and I still don't see any hands raised. Ildy White, you again?
Sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing that I know my husband couldn't be here either, but a lot of people bring up is the question of whether or not, I mean, we really have little developed infrastructure, and whether or not the infrastructure and the roads and our water and all that kind of thing can handle cramming in as many housing units as possible as well. And if we were to do something, it would feel better if we put more thought into developing useful and safe infrastructure before cramming in more housing units. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Additional public comment? Okay, I'm inclined to close the public comment portion.
On.
Yes, who is? I heard someone, but sorry, I can't see you.
That would be me.
Okay. Sorry, Dave, I can't, for whatever reason.
You can't see me?
Can't see you or Josh. I
Holy
see Joe and Paul and
Juan,
Matt.
Juan, you're missing out. We look great.
We look about as dapper as we ever have. So
115 years of middle-aged man right there.
Okay. Well, we're going to close public comment period and have discussion with the commissioners then, if that is okay with you guys.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Yeah, so I've got a few thoughts, and as far as the public engagement piece, I'm not going to beat around the bush here at all. I don't doubt that there has been some level of public engagement between IMEG and the community, but the fact that there is almost, I would go so far as to say 100% community opposition to this, it's been an abysmal failure, whatever engagement there has been. I'm sorely disappointed with what I'm seeing play out here, and I don't know what could have gone on differently other than way earlier in the process sitting down with the community and talking through what the goals and visions of this East Missoula community are, and particularly in light of the land use element that I think pretty well spells this out. I mean, it does pain me in saying this, but this is a critical piece of East Missoula, and I get it that it's sat there as kind of a wasteland of asphalt for too long and needs to be redeveloped, and certainly a housing component of that is justifiable, way more so than another sprawling mini storage. Which was the last thing that was rolled out before us. I do believe neighborhood center is a great land use designation for this, but at this point in time, unless I'm convinced otherwise here, I'm inclined to deny the revocation of the plan variation. I look at the neighborhood center language, the goals of designing this area to be a neighborhood focal point and center for activity, providing opportunities for retail, service, and employment. Character, a mix of uses can be horizontally and vertically integrated, etc. I think what the community is more, well, we've heard concerns about density, and for me, at least, it's less about density in the number of units than about design standards that encourage the way this neighborhood functions. So a few questions, rhetorical questions. Is there a current zoning designation that aligns with the goals of this neighborhood center? Land use designation? Probably not, and that's one of the reasons we're updating our zoning code. So there's probably not anything all that better out there in our menu of zoning districts that we could apply here, but that's not to say that CR3 gets us any closer, or the revocation of this gets us any closer to neighborhood center. So my answer is probably not. There's probably not anything out there better on the books, and that's why we need to create it. Does the revocation of the plan variation move us in the direction of achieving the goals of the neighborhood center? Land use designation and the vision that's articulated by the East Missoula community? From what I've heard and from what I'm reading here in the land use element, I don't think so. And I totally get it also that commercial cannot be necessarily an assured outcome in any of this, but certainly I think it can be encouraged more than the current CR3 zoning, and again, I think the revocation of the plan variation does not move us in the direction that we want to go. You've heard some folks concerned about the 125-foot building height. Given that there are very few buildings in downtown Missoula that tall, I would hazard a guess it's unlikely that that would play out in East Missoula. Nonetheless, the reality is that even though your proposed project and the elevations that you have in hand are showing one thing, there is no guarantee, unless it's memorialized in zoning, that is actually what's going to play out on the ground. If we had it to do over again, and I think I alluded to this at the last meeting, it probably, I was toying with the idea of could simply an amendment to the plan variation be accomplished that would achieve the goals that the neighbors are articulating and be a different path forward. Well, perhaps that could have been the case, but that ship has sailed, and this is where we are today. And there are a number of elements, I guess, conclusions of law in the staff report that I think I have a somewhat different view of. So for instance, criteria or point 3 under conclusions of law, revocation of the plan variation and applicability of the CR3 residential zoning district is appropriate for the location, character, and natural features of the property and surrounding properties. Not so sure about that. I think this will move us in the direction that we don't necessarily want to go. I think it's less about density than it is about design standards that encourage the possibility for ground level commercial. And I get it, Joe, that would create challenges for folks who might only be able to be at ground level. But again, this is such a critical piece of the landscape in East Missoula. It is a true, it has the potential to be a true community center, which it really is not now. And I think I'll stop talking, but I'm just not convinced that this is the direction we need to be going.
I have a question. I'm not, I don't know if this is a Matt or John Hart question. With CR3, can you explain to me exactly how, tell me the width of the difference between CR3 and what the community is articulating it wants? Like, is there really that much of a disconnect between CR3 and the new proposed zoning or neighborhood center, or again, the aspects that the community is asking for?
Commissioners, Matt Heimel here again. So for the CR3 residential zoning district, the main conflict that I've observed when compared with the public comments that we received so far would be the 125-foot maximum building height. I do have some slides from the last hearing I could bring up that show the permitted conditional and special exception uses that are allowed in CR3, if that would help show that what kind of uses can go in there.
Sure.
Okay, just a moment. It's loading, I assure you.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay. So here are some of the permitted uses in CR3, meaning those are just administrative permit review with no special standards. And then here are conditional uses in CR3. Note that this includes a professional business or a government office. And then looking at special exception uses, these would need to go to the Board of Adjustment for a public hearing. And this list for our current zoning pulls in a couple of uses from the CC1 neighborhood commercial uses. So retail, trade, and service up to 3,500 square foot, and a private lodge and fraternal organization would be both considered a special exception, but those are two examples of a commercial use, in addition to eating establishments.
Okay, and then, so Dave, do you, I'm trying to tap into how you're seeing it's not fitting.
Well, there's nothing in here that would, from a design standpoint, necessarily encourage the sort of commercial use that we're looking for. And also, I guess it's somewhat speculative at this point what the zoning would look like. But as the zoning code, the new zoning code, goes through the review process, I would certainly hope that whatever zoning districts would be proposed for this neighborhood center land use designation would include elements that would be encouraging this to actually play out on the ground. So we've heard some discussion of, well, what about higher ceiling height for the first floor? I don't know if that's the solution or not, but that's the sort of design accommodation that would, if not at the present time, at some point in the future, could accommodate both residential use and potential future commercial use. I'm just looking for something that actually moves us in the direction of neighborhood center, because I have no doubt that whatever zoning is going to ultimately be proposed here is not going to be precisely CR3. I'm certainly hearing from the neighborhood that that's not what they would want in a commercial center land use designation.
Well, I guess what I'm getting hung up as on number 8, maybe I'm just reading this wrong. On number 8 in the staff report, the intent of CR3 zoning is to provide for high density multifamily development and limited commercial and professional offices that would be compatible with adjoining residential uses in areas capable of being adequately served by public services. And this is kind of what Joe was saying. This zone could effectively be employed to form a smooth transition between lower density residential neighborhoods and major thoroughfares or commercial areas. Planned development units and plan variations are encouraged to promote innovative approaches to housing and environmental design. So I keep thinking like CR3, or if we revoke this and go back to CR3, it's not that different, or am I really missing something here?
Well, let's take the 125-foot thing for an example. That's currently under the plan variation. You could not do that. And again, it's not to say that that either the previous plan variation proposal or what's being proposed right now is going to do that. But again, just from the standpoint of zoning, you revoke the plan variation and you could do that. And I think it's that is moving in a different direction than certainly what I see as the neighborhood center, major goal of the neighborhood center is focused on, and that's creating something that really does align with community character.
Josh, it's so unlike you to be quiet. What?
I'm just thinking here. So, I mean, it seems like what's called for in this area is some zoning for a multi-story building with commercial on the ground floor and residential above. And I don't know if such a thing even exists, but it sounds like that's what the community wants. And in all cases, everything we're looking at right now, we're just hoping someone takes us up on the opportunity to build commercial, whether it's CR3 or the revoked variation, or even what looks like will be the new zoning. In no case is commercial the thou shalt on the bottom floor. It's all a hoped for.
Well, and even if it's not a thou shalt, what can we do via zoning better than in the CR3 here, that through design requirements will encourage and better incentivize that sort of development. I don't know what that is offhand. I don't think I see that in the CR3. I don't see it with the plan variation necessarily either. I was going to say the same thing, Dave. I feel like it's lose-lose for the neighbors. Like, it's not in the CR3. It's not in revoking the plan variation either. It isn't anywhere except in what the neighbors say they want, and hopefully incentivized in the new zoning with maybe design standards or that mean higher ceiling levels on the first floor or something like that. But really, it sounds like what the neighbors want is a retail commercial center in part of East Missoula that, I agree, man, would make it so much more livable. We don't want this to be a rabbit warren of housing where everybody jumps in a car and drives every morning and there's no hubbub and no feel of neighborhood. But I'm not seeing a way through to making that happen. See, what I wish would have happened, but maybe it did happen and I'm not aware of it, is conversations between East Missoula residents and the developer about, I mean, let's be serious, money talks. What about a private party actually being a partner in the project in some way to purchase some units that are being constructed, and actually if they are inclined to develop commercial, they would have real skin in the game and be able to assure that that happens, as opposed to simply hoping that that occurs at some point in the future. But that's not where we are today. I mean, that ship has somewhat sailed.
Joe, Matt, or Paul?
Yeah. Let me, Paul Forsting, IMEG. Dave, you know, completely respect your comments. We also have a decision space when we come to a project like this. This property was sold to somebody with a 44 unit approval. They came to us and said, hey, is there any way that we can do more units here? And I said, well, yeah, the base zoning's R3. And I apologize for my baby crying. It's cute. Good. I'm so sorry. It's a technique to soften out Dave and the others here. So they bought it. They're going to do 44 or 59 in the same footprint exactly. And so we think, 59 isn't crazy. The planning department said, hey, that's not crazy. The planning board said that's not crazy. And so you completely understand the need for the community, but we just don't have, we don't have these guys at a spot where they want to go back to the drawing board and draw it. And for very good reasons. We just haven't seen the need for those ground level commercial. Like Joe said, there's one that the city's now agreed to allow houses in it. And what you're going to get more expensive units because you had to build them to a construction standard, or a commercial standard, higher ceilings and different materials have to go in there. So we feel you. These guys are ready to build. They're apartment builders. They bought it with multifamily. The plan variation, for whatever reasons, locks them into that. And so, they have an entitlement for 44 units. They're going to maximize whatever they can build on the site. It's going to be at the same height. We're just talking about by location. This is where we can get affordable houses. There's no river. These aren't condos, $1 million condos going on the river. These aren't in the Rattlesnake. These aren't in the target range. This, just facts. This is an affordable neighborhood. And so we're going to get affordable units here. And what we're talking about is doing affordable units. The neighbors don't want studios and one bedrooms, but those are affordable units in this market. So I completely understand. And, we don't think there's room for a grocery store of any size there. We don't think that we could have any commercial or restaurant on the ground floor because of parking requirements. So we're really limited maybe in the real estate agent. I mean, is that, like Joe said, is that tipping the needle, having a little bit of office space on the bottom? Yes, it looks clever. But we're talking about 15 units at the cost of some high-end resident or high-end commercial space.
Joe?
Hey, thanks again. No, I think Paul hit it on the head, and I always just try to, especially looking at this project, thinking of the neighborhood center, and one of those bullet points on the goals of the neighborhood center is to accommodate higher intensity residential choices that contribute to countywide housing diversity. So I know there's things that might be in opposition, but it's viewed as a center. It's viewed as a whole piece, and we might not be able to check every single bullet point, with that, but we definitely adhere to one of the goals. And there's walkability. I mean, obviously the gas station's right across the street, but the fact of the matter is what Paul hit on, which is, we also are limited in our decision space. And, at the end of the day, this is, 3-story 44 units or 3-story 59 units. And for the number of houses, that are needed in the area and the number of units that are needed in the area and the number of units that can be provided, it just seems like, 59 units does accommodate a higher intensity residential choice. And also that's one of the goals in the CR3. So I don't think I can really add much to what Paul said outside of that.
Thanks.
So I'd say small retail entities are often the face of culture. You see this in downtown Missoula and the Hip Strip and other places where people really feel like, wow, that retail defines that area. And this has become a highly desirable place. And what we're doing in East Missoula right now, you guys and us, if we team up on this, we are making sure that East Missoula is a desert in terms of retail culture. This is a place where we've slammed in as many little houses as possible, or whether they're apartments or houses or whatever, and then people drive to wherever they want. It's defining a neighborhood in a way that this neighborhood has spoken up and said, we do not want to be defined that way. We want to be something else. And we're saying, no, we're going to maximize, and you don't get to have the kind of neighborhood character you want. And that's a tough pill to swallow. And I get the rules. Well, it's 44 or 59. That's what it is. You pick. Either way, there's not going to be any commercial. Just saying it feels wrong. It doesn't feel like this is what the folks in East Missoula want. And if they had it any other way, they would make it that way. And it puts us in a pretty rotten spot. And as Dave pointed to on ownership means control, I wonder if there is some way outside of this conversation for you to work with your landowner who can work with the folks in East Missoula. Maybe they can come up with a creative way to buy a ground floor unit, and then they take on the risk of leasing that out for commercial. But if we go through with this as it is, we are consigning the heart of East Missoula to something that the people in East Missoula don't want.
And make no mistake about it, we are making a decision here for the next 50 or 75 years at this location, and this will be thoroughly a bedroom community of Missoula.
Not the nice bedroom either.
Well, the irony does not escape me that we're having this conversation directly after our breaking ground housing plan, but I don't want to frame this in terms of either you're for this proposal as conceived or you are against affordable housing. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think there's nuance here, and I would love to be able to play a role in figuring out zoning that would actually move us not on just a few of the goal items of the neighborhood center land use designation, but a majority of those to create a win-win situation, because I just do not think I don't think that's what we have here before us today. Josh is absolutely right that what creates true character, a sense of community and culture is not monolithic housing. I don't know how else to say it.
Matt, yeah, go ahead. And you're muted.
See that my screen is giving me some trouble right now. Sorry about that. I only raised my hand because I wanted to point out that just seeing how the conversation is going, I know there's a recommended motion for approval in the staff report and in this agenda item. Just want to let you know, commissioners, that if you do go in the opposite direction, we do have recommended conclusions and motions for that, so that your decision is based on a conclusion relative to the criteria here. But if you had any other specific questions, not
just based out of thin air, right?
No, not thin air.
We are not trying to be arbitrary and capricious here, so thanks for figuring this out on the fly, Matt.
But so how do we? Yeah, through incentive design incentives. I mean, how do we get to what is being asked by the community? The question that we're answering today is still not necessarily going to, yes or no, it's still not going to get to what they're asking.
Part of it, I think, is meaningful engagement between the property owner and the community. I think that's one piece of it. I think it could very well be the case that there are plans on the shelf that if we deny this revocation today, which I still am inclined to do, that they'll move forward immediately with the 44 unit development. But even with that, I would say, doggone it, sit down with the neighborhood and I see you shaking your head, Paul. Maybe it's about the baby. I don't know.
He's talking about the baby.
But anyway,
I still think it's fair, Dave. But yeah.
But anyway, I don't think it's too late to have some meaningful conversations with the community. Over the long haul, I mean, if the 44 unit thing does not get developed with the plan variation as it stands, I think we still need to forge ahead. Well, we absolutely need to forge ahead with updating the zoning in a way that actually helps achieve the community goals. I don't know what that would look like on the fly right here today, but that would be my goal.
Josh?
So again, I'm going to ask you this, Paul, just because you're a real development professional. We're not. What would you say to the neighborhood if you heard them say, these are our goals, we want to see some commercial? And irrespective of this development, what would you tell them they should do?
I would tell them that the comp plan was established and our zoning was established. We're in a big corridor of R3. This has been R3 forever. So I know we want to put those aside and say, well, no, we're moving in some other direction and we're going to have all of our goals accomplished. But the fact of the matter is, this is just one property in a huge corridor of R3 zoned property. And that was a land use decision that was not made just unrationally or out of quick and hasty. It was made based on real goals and fundamental efforts. It wasn't from junior planning team. You guys have had a senior planning staff, a very experienced group for 10, 20, for a long time, longer than I've been around. And so this isn't an unguided approach. We're simply following the plans. And I don't know, guys. Nobody likes housing. It's just, I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where affordable housing is going to go. This is where it should go. But nobody wants it there. You know, the public's going to come out and say they don't want it anywhere. They don't want houses next to houses. They don't want houses anywhere. So I don't know what to do. I love houses. I want houses everywhere, but except in my backyard. But anywhere else is fine with me. I don't know. I'm just a little saddened by it. I think all the rights are there for the rezone. But I think it is an affordable housing issue. I think the neighbors clearly are making that the case. 44 or 59, we don't want these efficient things here. I get it. Nobody wants them, but we need them somewhere, guys. And so I don't know. You can play this off as not an attack on affordable housing, but we just heard a report that says we need housing units in any and all locations. And
I'm not talking about getting rid of 44 or 49. I'm talking about taking one unit out so it can be a store. So this isn't an either or, like affordable housing or commercial. I really think this is a design question, not an either or question. And in a more perfect world, there'd be a commercial space at the bottom of this thing that might be a coffee shop, restaurant type thing that might be able to eke out a living now that there's that many more people in East Missoula. It's not all 44 are gone and it's a shopping mall. Just one unit.
I know what you're saying, but that unit has to have parking that's tremendous. You're going to have parking standards that say you're going to have to put 10, 15, whatever parking spaces in there for that commercial operation. That's not what we have in the central business district in downtown Missoula in the hip strip. That says you need no parking. So yes, if you said get rid of all your parking requirements and put in whatever kind of commercial you want here, then maybe there's a path forward, but I doubt you're going to go there. That the parking require people are in love with parking. And so and the neighborhood will hate no parking. They don't want to hear that we'll just use up some whatever available street parking for this use. And so we're bound in many ways. And the bottom line is there has to be a demand for these commercial uses, and we're just seeing that not be the case. It's just that the demand isn't there. The demand is for residential. Eventually, it will be there. I think those storage units can be easily removed, and there could be a grocery store there. Storage units are the most temporary thing that they can be taken down in a day. So they'll probably be there our whole lives, but they can be removed, and supermarkets don't care. They'll pay $5 million for a piece of property. So, they'll tear down houses. They'll do whatever it takes once the market is established and a need is established. They do studies and then they buy all the property in the locations where those have to happen. They don't just haphazardly come along based on demanding they come, we put one in an apartment building. So I don't know,
Thanks, Paul. Matt? Oh, sorry. It looked like sorry. If you didn't have anything, I couldn't tell.
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
I'm prepared to vote.
Yeah, okay. I really want to try to, yeah. Even though, so Dave, play this out. If this is denied, then it's just 44 units go in we're really, this is all about 15 units and 8 feet. Is this what really is coming down to?
Well, it's more than that. It's coming down to 125 feet that's allowable. It's coming down to taking the word of the developer that what is being proposed will actually be built. Again, I have no reason to doubt the credibility or the intent here, but again, there's no assurance. We have seen proposals come before us in the past, and with the best of intentions, something is proposed, it doesn't get built, but the zoning's been changed or is now in place to allow something completely different. I just don't see this as it is a difference of units and number of units, but I do not see it as appreciably moving us in the direction of realizing the vision of neighborhood center, which I think includes much more, the spirit of it, as I read it, is much more mixed use than what is currently proposed. To your point, Paul, you might be surprised that we might be more willing to talk about parking and flexibility there to encourage different type of development than you think, because that's exactly what I want us to be able to grapple with at a creative level as we're creating these new zoning districts, is how to create the circumstances and the conditions to realize goals. And that might, all of this is going to potentially rankle someone, but that's the risk that we take at times. I do want to go back to something I heard earlier in terms of infrastructure. None of this is going to be completely linear. I get it that it might be nice in a perfect world to have a Highway 200 corridor completely rebuilt before any more development goes in East Missoula. That's not going to happen. We are intent. We've had conversations, some of us, with the MPO, Missoula Planning Organization, as recently as last week, about how we can start tapping into federal funding to implement the Highway 200 corridor plan. But in terms of individual projects like this and proposals, we can't just keep those completely on ice until every improvement gets accomplished on Highway 200 as we would like.
Okay, and so I'm still, I want to be convinced that that there is an appreciable difference or movement towards this neighborhood center if this is denied. And tell it to me again, Dave, because
well, I can't tell you.
I'll just be the turd in the punch bowl, and I'll be the.
No, I know I'm usually that turd in the punch bowl, so that's fine. I can't tell you that there will be an appreciable benefit, or that it will be appreciably better if we deny the revocation. What I can say is I don't think it's going to appreciably, if at all, move us in the direction of realizing the goals of the neighborhood center land use designation if we revoke it. That was kind of convoluted, I know.
I was with you for most of it.
So if we approve what is being asked of us today,
yeah.
And this language of revocation, I think, is what's like tripping everyone up.
The double negative screws us all up. Yeah.
So if we approve what's before us today,
then it just goes back to CR3.
Right.
And I think that moves us. That absolutely does not move us in the direction of achieving the goals of neighborhood center, and may move us in the wrong direction. If we deny it, if we deny the request before us today, I don't know that it's going to be a fatal. I don't know that the 44 unit or I don't think it's 59 versus 44. One way or the other is not going to really be the deciding factor here. It's more of, is our decision moving us towards realizing neighborhood center, or it is not? I think if we approve the proposal before us today, it moves us in the wrong direction. I think if we deny it, it's not going to get us everywhere we need to go, because we're still saddled with CR3, which still I think is, even though it might cover a swath of East Missoula, I think we're going to, soon enough, we're going to scrap it. And I'm sure it was created out of the best of planning intentions in a bygone year, but that does not reflect the year 2022.
So you're saying, okay, so if we go back to CR3, oh man, I'm just still not seeing how CR3 is a deviation from the direction of or the spirit of neighborhood center. Am I? And you think, Dave, that it really is it's a step away, even though it's. I'm still hung up on that number 8.
Well, okay, let me take a run at this. So as I look at this sterile language of CR3 residential, and the very name of the zoning district, I think, defines what the focus is. I see nothing in here with any, there's nothing in here design standard wise that I think would, other than saying, well, you can do a conditional use that might cover some categories of commercial, or these special exemptions, which might cover a little larger swath of commercial. There's really nothing in there that gets to the neighborhood character and design qualities that I really think are at the heart of much of the public comment that we've heard. So I think that's maybe getting closer to what I think is at play or at stake here. And again,
but so as the variation remains in place, it still doesn't get to those.
It remains in place until we change the zoning in a few months, or the project gets built.
Paul?
That's not correct. This is a legacy district, folks, and so this will be, unless we voluntarily get rid of this. This is a legacy district that we're having, and we will have building permit. We're meeting next week with our structural and mechanical. All the whole team's meeting next week.
Could John Hart speak to that? I don't think that's accurate. I think we have the ability. We've discussed this before. John or Karen, we as the Board of County Commissioners have the ability to change the zoning here, do we not? Am I mistaken?
Yeah, so the way the zoning project's been set up is to honor these, what we call legacy districts, these special districts. However, my understanding is the commission does have the discretion to rezone any of them really to the new districts. But the way that we've structured it was the assumption that we would maintain a number of them, including this one. So that's the plan, is to maintain them as legacy districts. The commission has the discretion to change that.
Right.
John Hart.
I'm just going to, Karen's absolutely correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Josh?
I'm okay. I just got to say it. I'm okay denying this. I feel like it's a small step, but it's a tiny step in the right direction. And it just kind of breaks my heart that we are going so far away from what the neighbors would actually want, and really making decisions that are going to affect what East Missoula is, not just these immediate neighbors now, for decades, and kind of relegating it to an identity that people who live there don't want to have to live out. And that's just distasteful to me. So it's a small step. Our step may be so small it's ineffectual, but it's better than a non-step, which is what I feel like the other is.
And Karen, can you, what Josh was just saying, can you help me verify is the wrong word, but can you explain how that would work?
I think what I'm hearing from the community and what I'm hearing from the commissioners, from Josh and from Dave, is that the existing plan variation is closer to what the community desires than revoking the planned variation. It's an imperfect solution, but if I'm understanding correctly, that it's seen as closer to meeting the community's desires than going through with the revocation. And let's see if I got that right.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And I think where I was hung up before is I was thinking that CR3 was actually closer, but you, the planners, are telling me that it's leaving it how it is actually that small step closer to.
I want to be careful there because we did make findings in the staff report. The planning staff made findings in the staff report that argued that that revoking the plan variation can be determined to be in compliance. However, we don't have the full record until it goes through the planning board and through the commissioners. And I think what I'm hearing from Commissioner Strohmeyer and Commissioner Slotnick and in the public input is folks saying, we think that actually the keeping the plan variation in place is closer to meeting the community's desires for their area than revoking it, which is what was put forward in the staff report.
Okay, Paul, you had your hand up. Sorry.
Well, I just wanted to add, my client just emailed me, texted me and said, hey, maybe they could figure a coffee shop in the basement. So I don't know, but we can't condition this thing, and so you're gonna have to trust us, and there seems to be a lack of that here. And so I don't know that we would get anywhere with that, but a coffee shop is something they could possibly, an office for the building, these are things I think, hey, maybe that would work. Maybe you guys could fit it in. The architect's not here. That's Vince Gavin of Gavin Hanks, but we just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and
great to have an open conversation with the neighborhood. I'd say about purchasing a ground floor unit that let the neighborhood take on the risk, and we can figure out how to work with them. We can't solve it right now, but we can get creative and see what we can do, and we can look at parking too. That isn't an impediment. It's a temporary impediment. It's something we made up. We can make up something else.
Am I available to comment really quickly here?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Yeah. I just kind of wanted to talk about what was just discussed as far as moving further away or closer towards, and it relates to what Dave was saying earlier, and he's absolutely right. If you revoke this, then although he's seen best laid plans in the past, you could have this 125-foot building, right? He said that a couple times today, and I think that coin kind of flips both ways, in the sense that this plan variation is just this plan variation. So yes, you do know what you're gonna get. But Josh has also mentioned, he would love to see working with a developer. He would love to see, none of these things can happen in the current plan variation. You can't do these special exceptions for some commercial space on the bottom floor in the plan variation. So I would actually argue that going to CR3 gets us way closer because it provides the option for that community involvement. I mean, these developers are people. They're on this call. They just texted Paul, hey, maybe a coffee shop. I mean, Dave's absolutely right. You're not voting on a plan that's in place right now. Although we do have a plan that they want to move forward with. These are individuals who live in Montana, and I know that public is frustrated. I understand that, but by keeping the planned variation in place, that frustration has nowhere to go. By revoking the plan variation, you at least give the option. You at least give the option to the developer and the community to say, okay, now we're in CR3. If we wanted to do something that's not currently in our plan, we have the option. Without that option, all they're going to get is 44 units, and that's not 44 or 59. That's a completely separate issue where really it's taking away all the potential for conversation by keeping the 44 units in place. And
the conversation's being taken away, or the potential for a conversation as being taken away if the variation remains in place, is what you're saying.
Yes, because in the 44 unit variation, you essentially have this footprint that you're limited to. They have to build out these units given on the plan variation, and once that's revoked, then there is at least the potential, like Dave has mentioned, although in the negative side, there's the potential for the building height, but also there's the potential for other things that are zoning applicable that are outside of that plan variation to be instituted. And I just thought it was worth mentioning because it's might not be the thing being voted on here, but I just would think that revoking it does sort of move it in that direction of conversation.
So Juan, can I ask Karen a question?
Yeah, please.
So Karen, is Joe accurate? Are we more close to is the potential for some type of neighborhood commercial closer with a revocation of the variation than with the CR3? Which one, the revocation of the variation or the CR3? Which one is actually makes a little bit of neighborhood commercial a greater possibility?
Okay, so I'll have to ask Matt to verify, but my understanding of the plan variation is it's linked very closely to a site plan and use, which is only for however many units, 44 units, as designed in the site plan. The CR3 allows for other uses. So that's, I think, what Joe's trying to say is that if you stay with the plan variation, then you have to follow that. Great. It's specific in the site plan.
So kind of what, Joe, I'm trying to paraphrase you, and please correct me if I get it wrong. Okay. You're saying on one side of the coin that Dave was throwing out, you could have 125 feet of Caprini Green emo, or you could also have, 3 stories, 4 stories with a coffee shop on the bottom. But if we don't do this, if we say deny everything, then we're rock solid 44 units, nothing else but that.
Exactly. And so that was just to provide context, because I felt like the conversation was going in the opposite direction, in the sense of, if we are talking about guiding ourselves towards what the residents do want, Dave is right. Nothing is set in stone. But what is set in stone is that plan variation. That cannot change. The developer is limited by that, whereas it's revoked. The developer has options, and you summarized it perfectly. So, thank you.
Right.
So refresh our memory. So
let's say if we were able to get to, I'm sorry to interrupt, Dave.
No, go ahead.
If we were to say, okay, we're going to approve the revocation and gamble that the potential it now exists for some commercial, we would be hoping that the developer would be open to some negotiation with neighbors and the county and be doing something creative. And that's our gamble, right? You guys could say, nah, the potential's there, but we would way rather just build 59 units and walk away.
Let me add, if our developer pulls the card under, it doesn't do commercial or doesn't do that, I would say we would probably walk from the project. We've got a reputation to keep too, Josh. There's a lot of work left on that. There's a lot of work left to be done here, and we want to do it all, but we don't need it. And so if we're up here being made a fool, then we'll have to walk away.
The flexibility exists with the CR3 and it doesn't exist with the variation.
There you
go.
Yes, that is correct.
For what though? Let's clarify.
The flexibility to create potential for 59 units, but also potential for this ground floor development, this more neighborhood center feel that people are asking for.
And also potential for 125 feet of brutalist concrete rabbit warren housing.
But even with the variation, there's no design standards that says that you have to create, a beautiful space, an inviting neighborhood, beautiful space. It could be 44 monolithic units and be totally soulless with the variation.
Yes.
So just to be totally clear, with the plan variation as it stands right now, and I wish I had the language in front of me, those 44, so the 44 units you're talking about must be residential? Does it specify what what use those units, the density of those units can be put. Is there any ability, Matt, Karen, anyone, can you answer whether commercial is allowed with the plan variation?
I will have to defer to Matt.
My understanding of the plan variation that's on record is that no, it's really set in being these 44 residential dwelling units.
So Paul, I appreciated what you said about reputation, and I think you're right on, and I'm glad that you said that. And you guys could attempt to work in good faith with the community, and knowing that we are open to creativity, that we could try and figure out how to get some small commercial in that thing. That, you know, I would believe you that you would try. If you didn't try, we would remember that too.
Well, and the other option there, and given the delays that we've had to get to this point, the only way to truly assure that that outcome comes to be is if we do not take action today, and the neighborhood, the community, and the developer truly sat down together right now and figured out some more solid plan to include within the revocation of the plan variation, that sort of accommodation for commercial. Be it might not be a coffee shop, it could be something else, but we're rolling the dice. If we might say, let's revoke it.
How do we go together? How do we say, okay, yeah, we will agree to go back to CR3 if you also agree to have a true conversation with the community to create this commercial space that they're interested in?
I think the only way to accomplish anything close to that would be to step away from the brink and have willingness on the part of the developer and the project proponent to engage the neighbors in a different way. I don't know if that would be the case. That's not for me to choose.
I guess I just want to be frank. I don't know that will ever come to a spot where the neighbors are happy with what we're going to propose.
Well, clearly they're not happy whatsoever right now.
I understand that. But that's par for the course, unfortunately, when you build houses. And so let me just see. I don't want to wait. I mean, he's saying this could take years. My client doesn't want to wait and take years. And so regardless of what we decide today, he's still going to consider doing 44 units hard. Like I said, what we could guarantee is that we would incorporate some type of office or some type of commercial at the ground floor, or I'll move step away from the project, and hopefully my coworkers would agree, and we would just distance ourselves from the project, and we'd be made a fool and look like bozos. But that's part of the course as well, and so that's just where I sit in the world as a developer's agent. But what could happen? I mean, if there was real intent from the county, we could look at like a planned variation. If you said, okay, we would, county didn't recommend we do this, but you could plan variation, you could go to it. But I think that sends us back to the planning board. All of it's going to be very difficult to swallow. I think the only thing that could be reasonably accomplished, if you get rid of that plan variation, I think my client's being honest when they say they'll include a commercial space at the ground floor. I don't know that it would ever satisfy the needs of the community. I don't think they want to see housing here, and I think they want something else. And I just want to be frank about it. I can't make miracles. I can't I'd never convince crowds of anything. I just don't. I barely convince you guys of the law. And so I just don't have it. Meetings with these folks. The negotiations so far apart from. It's just really difficult. So I don't want to sugarcoat that at all.
Juanita?
No, I thought Josh was going to say something.
Oh, sorry.
Say, Bob, you guys would commit to working with the neighbors on coming up with some creative way to get some commercial space on the ground floor, not the basement, but the ground floor. And that's not doing away with all kinds of housing. It's just one space. I would believe that you would try.
Yeah, I just got confirmation from my client. He said simple 1 unit commercial space.
I like it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm okay then.
Yeah,
like that better than the 44 because I feel like there's no potential with the 44.
There is no potential with the 44. Like that's, and I'm looking at Karen or Matt. What is that is the case. There's no potential for this commercial.
Not with it as
pretty specific that it's for housing units.
Yeah, so
in order for the community to move forward and to kind of achieve this vision, CR3 is the way to do that.
Anita?
Yeah, no, that's what I guess I was kind of saying it as a question, but it came out as a sentence.
Maybe you can't, maybe you can't see us. I'm sorry.
Oh, I can't. I'm sorry. I can't see Josh or Dave for whatever reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then my waving at the screen is doing no good.
Oh, so, yeah, no, I can't see. I can't see you guys at all.
John Hart just popped up.
So before John says his delivers his silver tongue prose as usual, I will let me just throw out another idea. I'm still not quite there, and I'm not sure I'm going to get here today for the revocation. But another option would be, and of course, my sense is that from Paul, your comments that the developer would not want to go down this path would be to entertain the possibility of an amended plan variation, which I think would get me to where I need to go here to be supportive. If that was coupled with and here I'm totally stepping out speculatively, but if we were to waive application fees, because I know that's always a matter of consideration in these matters. If the fees would be waived, would that sweeten the pot enough to contemplate an amended plan variation?
Amended plan variation with the variation?
I mean, we could not take that on today. That would be essentially starting the process over again. But to the extent that dollars are a consideration, what do you think?
If you're waiting for me, Paul Forsting, I think it would just have to be considered by the client. You know, they're going to walk away and that'll be considered. We've got 44 units, or we can go back and, you know, see where we can get with getting more units. You know, I don't know that they're in a position to make it. I think they don't want to wait, you know, but I don't want to, I'm not trying to build pressure on you guys or anything, you know, I'm just trying to interpret what I understand from our clients.
Karen
and Tim have hands up.
Thank you, Karen.
I guess the one thing I would point out is the very real timeline constraints of doing that. It of course depends on the zoning timeline, but the zoning's already set up for public hearings in March and in May. So it would require a very expeditious timeline for the developer to get through that process. Not to say it can't be done, but just wanting to make sure that that's on the record somewhere.
So see, I hate to keep beating this dead horse, but like CR3 is drastically different than what the new zoning is. The new zoning that's being proposed in the spring. Is it that?
Well, what I'm contemplating, Juanita, though, is perhaps you could approximate what that new zoning would look like by way of amending the plan variation.
Or can't even, don't we have with CR3, don't you have the flexibility to achieve?
No, I do not think so. Like I mentioned, it contains nothing regarding design that would accomplish what the community is looking for. Just in and of itself, I keep coming back to this, and some might see this as a red herring, but 125 feet, that better not be in the new zoning. I don't think it will be. But that's something that could be dealt with in an amended plan variation, just like the current plan variation deals with that, with height.
Oh, Tim Worley.
I was just going to add to what Karen mentioned regarding the really short time frame that we likely have for an amended plan variation. Considering the noticing requirements, the practical time frame for doing it is going to be essentially overlapping the new zoning public hearing process. So I would just advise considerable caution because of that noticing requirement.
So basically you're telling us we can't do that.
Well, and I haven't done the math, Juanita, but it's the time frame for it would be so tight.
Okay.
It's not like you have all the time in the world. It would be a very constrained process.
Yeah, I think what Dave suggested, where if the applicant was to mirror some of the design considerations in the zoning, and you get some certainty with that, that's what, which is what the community wants. That's probably the best way to do it. But I just wanted to make sure it was clear that the timeline still would be tight.
Is it possible or impossible timeline wise?
Well, we have to juggle all the projects in the works, and it depends on our work as well as the IMEG's work. So it's not like there's a lot of things to consider. The stars would need to align. Not to say it can't be done. And certainly this is a project already in the works, so it's not like it would be put at the bottom of the heap or something. But
I bring it up because that, to me, that is as close as we can get to trying to find a win-win solution here.
Or, I mean, at the same time, it's like, okay, if we go back to CR3 and Joe and Paul and the developer, you guys are really committed to working with the community and proving what you're saying, that and proving that, yeah, we're going to have these conversations and develop this commercial space. Yeah.
That would work. I mean, that would work if that happened.
Yeah, and you know, can I speak?
Yeah,
Juanita?
yeah.
This is Joe Dennert. You know, and with that conversation too, Dave, like you were recommending with that process, you know, like they were saying, it would be extremely tight, and then we would be amending a plan variation that, you know, could be sworn in as a legacy district, might have other options for you guys as commissioners to say, no, we don't want that. And that might be a little convoluted of a process as well, on top of just the timing issue. Just wanted to bring that up.
So I'm still back to like my original, that CR3 does allow for more flexibility. Am I wrong in thinking that?
No. Karen.
The CR3 zoning allows some flexibility, but with that flexibility comes
flexibility. They could build
flexibility that a lack of design standards, if you will.
But so with the variation, there's a lack of design standards.
The variation actually has a pretty detailed site plan. It's not, I mean, it's not to the point of architectural drawings necessarily, but you have a pretty good idea what's going to go there.
Yeah, I have the architectural drawing for the plan variation that exists right now, if that would help at all with the conversation.
So the question before us is yeah, the revocation and 44 units and no conversation, or back to, I'm sorry, or approving the revocation going back to CR3 and it's 59 units and a conversation.
Yes. I'm not sure if that question is for me.
There.
Yes, ish.
Say that again. Sorry, Josh.
I was just waiting for Karen. I was hanging on her words.
Well, Josh and Dave, I can't see you guys at all, so I don't know.
Just sit there thinking. I'm ready. I mean, how probable, Karen, is Dave's suggestion, which I like the threading the needle there. I just want to make sure it's possible.
I mean, what would it take to align the stars?
Yeah.
I'm all about that.
From our perspective, it's going to take it pretty tight. It'd be pretty tough. I don't know if you wanted to hear from me, Dave, but I think it's, just giving the timing of all of it, it's going to be really tough because we are chasing your zoning. If you're zoning, if we're not ahead of your zoning, then whatever we're doing is really out of place. It seems not very. If you give us that option, if you tell us, hey, that's the only way you're going to get to 59, I'm going to talk about it with my client and we'll figure it, he'll get to consider it. And I just don't have the benefit of sitting in the same room with them and, taking a recess or whatever to do that. So you completely understand if that's your decision and then he's going to have to decision. Does he want to do 44, which he's ready to build on, or does he want to try something else? He's committed to do one commercial space in the basement or in not the basement, the ground floor. Just one commercial space. He wanted to be clear, just one space. He's not committing to the whole floor. He still wants to put his ADA accessible units down there. So I don't think it's realistic to go to the neighbors and say, hey, what do you guys want to see here? And then act in that way. It's more realistic that he'll come up with his own solution for what is possible and try to pursue whatever he'll do. He'll do a commercial space. He'll just do what he said. He'll do a commercial space there, but I'm assuming he'll want to have control of what it is, who has that, and maybe make it available for sale. I mean, what you're saying, if there's actually monies available and there's somebody who's active and wants it, I don't see that as being unreasonable or impossible, but just being realistic. I don't want to sugarcoat it at all. I don't think we're going to go around and say, what do you guys all want to see? And then we're going to go look for that type of franchise. And that's going to be what happens. It's going to be a market-based decision on commercial too. So, I don't know if that's good enough for you guys. And I also add, I don't know that we need like a conditional use. I don't know enough about the zoning now, but do we have to come back in for a conditional use for any type of retail or any type of use? And so we're a separate process away from it. I don't know if anybody knows that, but.
And so, Karen or John Hart, like the idea of waiting until the new zoning is in place, that's also an impossibility right now, or what?
Well, they deserve an answer on this proposal. They have a proposal and you have a deadline that we've already
extended.
They've already extended. So we have to do something on this proposal one way or the other.
Okay. Yeah, so we have to do something on this proposal right now, one way or the other. And sorry, Josh or Dave, I can't see you again.
Yeah, I guess I just to Paul, frankly, I think what you've described is exactly what has brought us to this point today by way of the tendency on the part of a property owner to second guess the neighborhood, that you're gonna plan what you plan and bring it out, and that's what it is, and folks and hope for the best. And I don't mean to be too pejorative or putting words in your mouth here, but what is necessary and what would have produced, I think, a different outcome today had been if there was just a genuine discussion with the community very early in the process. And I'm not talking about identifying what franchise is going to go in, but just talking about design elements in a way that truly shows. I don't know if the property owner actually lives in Missoula adjacent to this parcel or not. Maybe the individual does, but clearly the folks who are most impacted and are going to be living adjacent to this proposed development every day are not real happy with the level of engagement and what is being rolled out here. And that's why I suggested the idea, if there was time, if the stars were able to align, to think about an amended plan variation, sweetening the pot with a waiving of the fees, if that would help you get 59 units, and some greater accommodation for some development that would align with neighborhood center. But if that's not in the cards, then we vote it up or down today.
I guess just to be clear, very clear, Dave, I think if you're saying that's an option, then even if you vote up or down, we could still propose it, right? I mean, we could still propose an amended plan variation, you know, assuming you'd be willing to listen to it and you would guide your planning staff to process the application, which they told us not to do. Then even if you vote up or down today, we still have that option, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
hey, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. This is Andrew Hagemeyer. I'm driving to the West Valley Community Council meeting right now and only catching part of this conversation. It's a fog bank too, so I'm doing my best. But I'm hearing about an amended plan variation, and I just have to be honest. I think this is the Frenchtown exit. Nope, that's the way station.
Maybe you should.
I'm going to get off. I'm going to pull over and I'm going to pull over.
That's a good idea.
So I think the realistic chances of getting a plan, like engaging the neighborhood, drafting a plan variation, getting it in our hopper and getting it through the process before we get the new zoning approval is almost none. And I just don't want to send the applicant down a route on something that's just not really feasible. So here's the problem. Once we approve the new zoning, there are no more plan variations. We would be asking them to do something that doesn't exist anymore. So I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying, in my opinion, being the project manager on the zoning project, knowing what it takes to organize a community meeting, process that feedback, and actually draft something, it's just, I think we're asking them to do something that's impossible, nearly impossible. All right, I'm going to go back up.
Drive safely, Andrew. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I was looking for an astronomer who could actually align the stars, not that, Andrew.
But can stars align if this is approved and CR3?
So my glass is not half full on this. I mean, I got to be honest that yeah. even perhaps there will be some postage stamp of a corner commercial unit, but maybe. And if it does, is that? I guess that's even speculative enough for me that I'm not sure that it's worth the cost. So
Dave, if I'm understanding it right, we got the speculation you just mentioned, and I'm not gonna argue with you. You're correct on that. It's speculation. We have a chance versus 44 units and no chance of commercial. That's kind of, it's looking to me like 59 units and the chance, or 45 units and no chance. And what I'm hearing from the neighbors is commercial is what they're excited about, what they want. And from I won't say that my whole spiel again about culture and retail, et cetera. I feel like that's really that would help change, even in a small way, how East Missoula feels. Do you feel like, is that an accurate summary?
Yeah, I think it probably is. With the other risks, I guess, associated that
for sure
that it doesn't get built the way that it's being proposed.
Yeah. The risk is it doesn't get built that way. They go 125 feet of East German concrete. They could do whatever the heck they want. They own the land, right? And they can build as many units as they can go big. But what Paul was talking about reputation, and Joe seems like a really nice guy here. I feel like I want to give these guys a chance to create that commercial space, engage with the neighborhood to some degree, and make a tiny piece of this neighborhood center thing come to reality. And I'm afraid if we go to 44, we get nothing.
So at the risk of protracting this even longer and keeping Paul from his baby and other folks and Karen from feeding her hungry dog who's taking a crap on the bed in the background. Could you pull up the elevations, Joe? I mean, I'm curious from a design standpoint, what is it that you're proposing? And maybe Karen, you could chime in here at some point in terms of what, well, maybe it's not Karen. Matt, anyone from CAPS, as far as the plan variation, what design standards are baked into that might be different than CR3?
So we are. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I don't see.
We are in the 11th hour, and I do not believe I have the ability to share my screen. So I sent this along to Matt Heimel. Matt, if you could pull up the 3D elevation so he'd be able to see him, that'd be really helpful. I don't think I can. Oh, wait, here we go. I have a share content. I just got it. 1 second. Let me pull up the 3Ds. Okay. Here we are. Can you guys see those?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you make them a bit bigger?
Yeah, I'll close the side screen. How's that?
Yeah.
Hey.
Okay, so you're gonna have to ask your question again, Dave, because I was freaking out that I wasn't able to share my screen. Sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to see what you were planning, and also be clear that this is not necessarily what would be required by CR3. But then I also want to ask CAP staff, with the plan variation, what sideboards are there in terms of design? Because again, I think design is at least a piece of the discussion here and concern of folks.
Commissioners, this is Matt Heimel here. There are no specific architectural design standards with the plan variation. There are draft architectural elevations in the plan variation documents in our files, but as far as architectural elements that you see typically in form-based or other zoning codes, we don't have those with the 44 unit plan variation, other than substantially complying with the site development plan.
I'm not quite following that. You said there's elevations that are somehow in the floating around out there. Are those just, what were those?
I think insofar it's a two-story building, but there are no specific design standards for that.
Yeah, it can be anything.
They approved a site plan, not elevations. They approved a site plan, and it includes a bunch of conditions and requirements related to things like landscaping and parking and such, but they did not adopt as part of the package the actual elevations. So how it looks, the elevations could be what was proposed, or it could be something different.
Joe, did you guys happen to prepare anything that would approximate what this would look like if there were just 44 units? Would it essentially look the same, but just chopping off a few units?
Yep, that's exactly right. So this would be a similar design, just less units. And then these are the proposed modifications to the zoning district outside of the locked-in site plan. So.
Yeah, and let me add that Derek, the owner, just texted me and said that the smaller building, the 11-unit building, is where they were thinking about a commercial space. You know, it could be where the mailboxes are at too, and you know, a meeting spot. So that's what he just told me, and so I'm just interested in keeping you in line with.
And that smaller building, that's on the northern portion of the triangle, right? I'm correct.
So that smaller building, if you guys can still hear me, would be this one. Right, so here's our site plan. This is the colored site plan. That smaller building where we're going to say that there will be a commercial would be here, right, Paul? Is that what Derek just said?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the 2D plan view, right? So that's the 11-plex, and how it relates to the 3D is this is the 11-plex there.
So flip back if you could, Joe.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, as it would be your prerogative where the commercial went, but that's behind the gas station. Is that how I'm reading this correctly?
There's a gas station there, and there's a marijuana business. There's that little shed there, that like elongated shed, is a marijuana distributor.
Right there.
Corridor.
Okay.
Yep. There's a commercial corridor already established, unfortunately, I guess.
And that's not in our site, just so you all know. 16A is not in the property.
Right.
Yes.
16A is where the Ole's is and the weed shop.
Ole's is a 19.
Okay.
Oldies is up here, and then we have the lot 16A would be the marijuana shop.
And Josh and Dave, I still can't see you guys, so if.
Yeah, I'm at the point where I think we just need to get a motion.
Do one more ask here is Lee Bridges still out there?
Looks like her hand's up.
Oh, I didn't see that. I'm sorry.
I'd like to ask Lee a question if I could.
Yep, go ahead.
Please do, Josh.
So Lee, if you, because you are with the East Missoula Community Council, have your finger on the pulse of the neighborhood in the way we don't, if you feel like people have the choice between 44 units and no commercial, or 59 and a commercial space, which one would they like to have?
44, hands down.
Okay. I was misreading that. I was thinking you all were much more focused on the commercial side of it.
No, and I meant to get back to you and have a conversation with you about that. We are very clear in our understanding of what this developer plans to do. And with our choice, 44, 100% of everybody I've spoken to and heard from. And believe me, I'm getting hammered with everybody contacting me. It's definitely the 44 over the 59.
And that's 44 and no commercial.
Correct.
Well, that was very clear. Thank you. So, Josh or Dave, does that?
Is there a motion, and we can modify it as necessary, Matt? Whoa, what do we got here?
It's Commissioner, so Matt Heimel here again. There's a couple motions for you to consider if you go towards denial of the request. The first motion has, amended conclusions. And then the second motion is actual denial. And we can change any of this. This is a Word document, so I can retype, move. These are open to change.
Okay, and I see John Hart popped up.
Yeah, I just want to say, well, I'll say a couple things. I think one thing that we've clearly established during this meeting is that I'm perhaps the most ignorant person in the meeting when it comes to zoning. But here's what if you're going to vote to deny, the staff report obviously will need to be amended more significantly than this, and you know, we'll have to take some time to do that. We'll have to incorporate what we heard in public comment, incorporate the concerns that were expressed by all three of you, and so I just want to make that clear that it's very likely that these will not be the only three conclusions that would be amended in the staff report. I'm assuming there's a successful motion to deny.
So based on that, John, and sorry for butting in here, Juanita, but I guess
no, you're fine.
Can't see my lips moving or hands flailing. So John, based on that, if we went down this path, and I'm not presuming how my colleagues will feel about this, but if we did go down this path, would we need to read into the record 1 through 3 here, or are those in flux enough at this point in time that that those would be crafted after the fact based on the discussion and public comment that have been heard here today, and that we would just simply skip to point number 2?
I think you could, if you agree with the 1, 2, 3 amended conclusions that Matt's put on the screen, I think you could, you could make those part of your motion as well as then the final sentence. But I just want to make it clear for the public, for everybody, that the staff report will need to be revisited in total based on the decision that you make here today. So that's not very helpful.
No,
that is helpful.
So, but then Dave, does that mean number 2 would be the clearer motion for denial if this was to be denied?
So let me take a run at this. And if I screw it up, we can always back up and try again. So I'm going to move that the conclusions in the staff report be amended to state the following items 1 through 3, and that the request to revoke the Canyon Gate Ole's plan variation be denied based on public testimony and amended conclusions pursuant to section 8.25 of the Missoula County zoning regulations.
Did that work?
John Hart, does that?
Or we could say, I could amend my motion to say that the conclusions in the staff report be amended to state the following items 1 through 3 and other.
So a summary of the discussion today.
Other conclusions to be summarized following this public hearing or some such thing.
I see nodding from Karen, but.
Yes, Karen is nodding.
But
John,
that sounds incredibly squishy.
How about the findings and conclusions in the staff report be amended to state the following, including but not limited to 1 through 3, and then that the request to revoke be denied based on public testimony and amended findings and conclusions. Because I'm not sure that just the conclusions will be amended. I think some of the findings may need to be revisited to reflect the discourse during this public hearing.
So moved, just according to what John said.
I'll second that.
Okay, can we just check that, Matt, with your magic typing, that you captured what John said? Or John, can you look at what Matt has typed and make sure that we're correct?
My change, just so everyone knows, Matt Heilman from CAPS, is I updated motion 1 to have findings and conclusions, and then including but not limited to. And then the second motion is updated to have amended findings and conclusions instead of just conclusions.
Yes.
Looks fine to me.
Yes, I move what's on the page right there.
And I'll second that.
And any further discussion?
I just want to thank everyone for hanging in here, I'm Megan, the developer. I hope that you understand that even with this, we're trying to take this as seriously as possible, which is why we've spent 3 hours or so talking about it. It's not the outcome that you're looking for, but I certainly hope that we can move forward in a productive fashion in East Missoula.
Any additional comment? And Josh, I'm sorry, I can't.
I just thank everybody too for hanging in there, and this was a hard one, and I feel good about us respecting the will of the East Missoula Community Council, who's put tons of effort into this, and I'm a little bit disappointed on the lack of commercial. That I don't want to see the identity of East Missoula become really what it feels like now, and I feel like there was a glimmer here, but it's going to have to become something else another day.
Yeah, I guess I can live with this. I was definitely more in the approval camp, and maybe I'm being Pollyannish and hoping that with 59 lots and diversity of of options, but I can live with this. And if this is truly what the community is saying that it wants, and then the developer is still getting what the developer wants, then I can live with it. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for your consideration, guys.
Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Yeah. See you guys.
Thank
See ya.
you guys so much, Paul and Joe.
See ya. Thank you all.
Thanks for everyone from the neighborhood and East Missoula hanging in there with us.
And John and Karen, the staff, Matt.
Thank you all. Be safe.
Goodbye. Hopefully Andrew Hager